Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to another show. I'm going to be reviewing another Time Rabbit video. I've been trying to catch up on these, given my former absence. And since I've had this weekend to just kind of sit around and chill, I've been trying to catch up on a lot of videos that I've been meaning to watch. And this one I did watch before. I think I saw this one the beginning of just this last week. Was probably watching it while I was, doing some, doing some monotonous things at work. Had it on in the background. This one's kind of an interesting one. It's a little longer for most of times videos. It's about an hour long, and it is, as the title says, it's a conversation between JRobin and Jack Angstreich. Jack Angstreich is kind of notorious amongst Darth Dawkins and people that are fond of him and follow him because the two of them have been in a lot of discussions, a lot of I don't even know if they've ever been in any what would be even close to something considered a formal debate. They've just had a lot of run-ins, mostly in Discord channels. And Darth, of course, considers Jack a troll, and he's not worth talking to because Darth has defeated him so soundly, and whatever. But JRobin, for whatever reason, was decided that he was going to bring him up while he was hosting a clubhouse. The worldview, in fact, I'll pull this up right now. Let's see here. Well, this is actually the beginning of the video, but once we get into this, the video is of the clubhouse that's going on. It's worldviews and conflict, I believe, which is Darth Dawkins Clubhouse Club. And several of these guys host out of them, JRobin being one of them, and he's hosting this particular show, and I can't remember what the title of it is. It's something about, atheists being no good or stupid or, something like that. That's the implied part of the title. Anyway, uh, Tom Rabbit does a nice edit here, a couple of nice edits here. And in the beginning, he illustrates how this conversation starts off. This Clubhouse has the replay on, which for people who aren't familiar with Clubhouse, when the replay's on, if you are part of Clubhouse, if a replay's on and you happen to miss that particular group, if you follow anybody in the group, you might get a notification later on saying, "Hey, you missed this one. It's available for replay. You can tune back in and watch it." And it gives you like a list of them. They put up suggestions all the time. But at any point, the person who made that particular room will turn that replay on. They can go back in there and turn the replay off, and it's no longer available. And from what I understand from Clubhouse, it's gone for good. So so yeah, it's fairly telling what happens with this one, given that the replay is on when they begin talking, and then at some point somebody just switches that off. So yeah, I don't think there's too much more to say in advance of this other than to kick this one off. I'll give a few shout outs to people who have joined. I'm kind of surprised you are. Thanks for joining me on a cold Sunday. It's Michael Deaton. As always, I think you were first. So I don't do like a points thing. I mean, I've joked about it, but I still don't have anything like that. Maybe one of these days I'll pull up a spreadsheet and start like giving people spatch points or something. I don't even know what to do. Bill Pesto, good to see you. Procrastinator, Gorison Faye. Randolph, always good to see you. Maya, welcome. Mickey D, Rebel Melee, Brian Stevens. Brian, sorry, was I just 1 minute short? He's like, "Where's my shout out? I'm leaving." All right, you do you. Yeah. So we'll get into this one. I'm gonna try to let this thing play for larger segments that I usually do, and well, as much as I can, but kind of let these explanations between the two of them talk out. And when this begins, I think JRobin does a slightly better job of letting Angstreich flesh out some of his explanations, and then, as usual for JRobin, if you're familiar with him, if this is the first time you're seeing him, you're in for a treat. For those of us who are familiar with him, he starts to kind of lose steam and get a little frustrated. I think about halfway through this. So anyway, we will get this started. I'm going to change this perspective just a little bit. Everyone, as usual, holler at me if anything's going on with the audio. If I mute myself by accident, pause it, and then you don't hear me talking, it's probably because I muted myself during a during a coughing fit and stupidly forgot to unmute myself. I haven't normally had to do that, but with this, still fighting this flu, so we'll see what's happening. Anyway, apologies for that. Probably too much information. Here we go.
When I said mind, I defined mind, so there was no way I could have been equivocated. Yes.
Okay, why don't we just replay it?
To hopefully be a rational atheist for you and not dodge your questions. I think it's hard to make a case for atheism because it's the absence of a position.
Okay, I see. Hold on. I see Jack Angstreich's in here. So, Jack, I'm going to give you one chance. I'm going to give you one shot at this. Please don't blow it. Okay, because this is probably the last. This is probably the last time.
I like the.
Hold on a minute, Dave. I'm talking.
I'm pretty sure that was Tom. I like the little the little add-in of the "Lose Yourself" melody kicking in there.
This is going to be the last time I probably talk to you. Okay, and so I do see you're here. So, Dave, I'm going to move you back down. If you want to come back up later, you can. Jack, this is the question I want you to answer when you come up here. If you don't answer it, then we're done. I want you to finish this sentence. Well, first I'm going to lay the groundwork. We're defining God as that which is ultimate and a mind. Okay, meaning that God is that which is foundational to all of reality, that all things derive and depend upon. God's a mind, meaning that he's conscious, he has awareness, intelligence, agency, those kind of things. So, from that, as an atheist, the position is that there is no God. So I want you to finish the sentence here. God does not exist because.
So there's the classic JRobin question. God does not exist because, huh? Why not a God? Maybe. Sorry, I don't know how I went into the Jackie Mason bit, but yeah. So that's how things are going to start off. Angstreich talks a little slower than I'm used to in some cases. Like he's not real rapid fire, which is it's not to say that this man is slow. He is pretty smart about most most philosophical stuff. He seems well read. But he's very meticulous, and he takes his time trying to break this stuff down. Which for somebody as impatient as JRobin, is I mean, it's got to be like a kind of torture for JRobin to deal with that because he just wants to back and forth, holler, and he wants answers quick so that he can start. Really he wants quick, precise, not even precise, just quick, angry input from an atheist so that he can turn around and strawman him more. And then by the time he's done, like he either doesn't get enough answers, therefore the atheist is useless, or he got all this stuff and none of it worked for the atheist, and so JRobin totally dominated. It's interesting. So either way, JRobin wins. It's a neat world they live in. I think this is an interesting question. Randolph asks, what is Didi's and his sycophants' obsession with famous brand names and reusing their logos for their avatars? Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Like I think because he had done the Duncan atheism thing and had that done up, and then there's been a few that have kind of played around with it. Enlighten one, whose video I covered in way too much time yesterday. He's got an avatar where it's actually a variation on Darth Dawkins debunked that user's avatar, I think, because he's got Darth Dawkins debunked. I think it's a take on the Dunkin' Donuts and the Dunkin' atheism logo, and then Enlighten one, riffed off of that. So yeah, it's become kind of like a weird like meta meme at this point. The Red Robin thing, I don't know why JRobin's he's using the Red Robin Gourmet Burgers logo as his avatar. I'm thinking the only reason he uses it is because one of his names is Robin, first name, middle name, last name. I don't know. When he used to call into the Skeptic Generation, that was the name he would give them, was Robin. So, yeah, your guess is as good as mine. I know that some of these guys, for being, going as spiritual and as Christian as they are, they like their material stuff just as much as any of us, pragmatic skeptics do. Darth, like I've mentioned it before, Darth loves himself some Apple products, loves them. Will abandon a discussion online when an Apple thing is about to have, one of those conferences. Like I own an iPhone, I don't watch those things. I don't pay attention to when they're coming out with new stuff. I usually find out like a month later. I'm like, oh, there's a new watch out. Okay, neat. Never owned one of their watches, but Darth probably knows the schematics of every model of their watch. He's, yeah, not sure. But they're people just like us, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Not that there was any doubt of that. Here we go.
All right, I just sent you an invite. You can answer that question, Jack. Finish the sentence.
Well, you can't have mental content without a world. So that would be why God can't exist
Okay, what's a
prior
world?
to creation.
Define world.
Something external to a mind which furnishes content.
Okay, how does it follow that there needs to be something outside of a mind in order for something to be conscious? And you have a lot of background noise too, so you might want to mute your mic or something.
I'm a little curious about this too, because I don't think that I've never specifically gotten into the philosophy of mind, but I know one of the issues that I've just a couple quick intro things that I've seen of it. There's always the issue of the mind-body problem, which is sort of kind of like, I think, the initial one that usually comes up when somebody's introducing um, philosophy of mind as a discipline. They'll discuss that, and it's interesting to me that, like, the way that I've seen that presented, just generally, very generally for lay people, that a lot of Christians seem to just sort of gloss over the fact that there is any kind of issue with the mind-body problem. Like, there isn't a mind-body problem, and the way that JRobin and Darth Dawkins and others, they when they're insisting that there is this impersonal mind that is eternal, and it's atemporal, eternal, it's non-physical slash transcends space, um, simultaneously omnipresent, in some cases, and then perfectly good, omnibenevolent, however they want to put it, maximally good, whichever way they want to couch that. But they've just sort of kind of planted a flag in that you can have something that exists that's there's this primary existing thing, that the thing that's responsible for everything is a disembodied mind. And so, but it's always a little bit usual. The way we would define a mind is something that is interacting with a world around it. And the particular mind that JRobin and Darth Dawkins are positing is a mind that didn't have anything around it and instead created everything around it with its will. So that's some of where this is going to go, but then they're going to get into agency, which gets interesting.
You mean, why is it the case that consciousness presupposes something external to consciousness in order for consciousness to be possible? Is that the question?
Is that what you told me? Mental content.
Yeah.
So you said that requires an external reality outside of the mind. So I want to understand, how does that follow?
So consciousness is a contentful mental state, right?
Consciousness?
Yeah. Consciousness is a contentful mental state, right?
Sure.
Yeah. So the idea about content is, so I take it that content is propositional, and
no. So when it comes to God, we're not talking about propositional knowledge here.
Oh, so God doesn't have beliefs?
Not in the way that we think about beliefs here, no.
So what does it mean to say that God has a mind if he doesn't have beliefs?
God has some sort of God is able to be, one, relational and personal. God is able to be revelatory. God has, as I said earlier, awareness. God has agency. God has intelligence. That's what a mind denotes.
Well, wait a minute. If a human mind didn't have beliefs, would it be a mind?
A human mind?
Yeah.
Well, a human mind and God's mind are different.
So then you're equivocating on mind.
No, because I defined mind earlier at the onset. I didn't equivocate.
Yeah, but in your definition,
I
asked you. Yeah, but in your definition, I asked.
Randall says, I've spoken with this guy talking with JRobin. He was being supportive of me in a live stream I was in with Darth Dawkins. Darth doesn't like him, but I do. He's nice. Yeah, Jack can be nice. I've spoken with him a couple times. Not much. I don't know him well. Anytime that I've run across him, every once in a while, like if depending on like kind of the mood he's in, if you bring up something, he can like shut you down because he thinks that you're trying to like put up an argument. But I think that's from years of doing this kind of stuff, and you have to like, no, I'm not trying to argue with you. I'm actually agreeing with you. I'm asking you about this other clarifying thing. I've seen that kind of stuff happen, but that's not just Jack. That's a lot of people that have been doing this stuff from like the Pal Talk days on. But no, for the most part, I don't have any issues with Jack. I have seen him get. I have seen him treat people pretty badly. One could argue that some of the people he was treating bad, like he's like, kind of going, Darth on them, like yelling at them, calling them stupid, swearing at them, that kind of stuff. One could argue that the people that he was talking with were being dishonest or playing dumb or any of that kind of stuff. But that's kind of the stuff that Darth Dawkins used to justify his behavior. So, but other than that, I didn't take any of that personally. I don't really hold that against him. It was just, conversations that have gone bad. If anybody's reading the description for this, where I mentioned in there where Jack does not miss his chance to blow, I'm not talking about to blow as in to suck. I'm talking about the song reference "Lose Yourself" from Eminem. That's what I'm kind of riffing on from what Tom Rabbit did at the edit before. No, I don't have anything against Jack. I think Jack is a smart guy, and he does a good job in this conversation too, because he brings up a lot of things that I think that guys like Darth Dawkins and JRobin want to avoid when they're asserting things like, immaterial mind, ultimate foundation, stuff like that. So, and then insisting that this thing has agency too.
Asked you, right? If by mind, in the case of human minds, those properties would apply, and you said no.
No, you didn't say in the case of human minds. The only mind that was invoked here was God's mind. You asked me certain questions, and then at a certain point, I said, no, I don't believe that, because I don't believe God has propositional knowledge. At which point...
Right, which is a problem, because now you're no longer talking about what we would define as a mind. That was Jack's point, right? A mind should contain propositional knowledge, which would be things about beliefs and desires. But JRobin has said he doesn't believe that God's mind would contain those things. So that's the problem. So Jack is probably going to say something like, if I remember right, he probably mentioned something about this sounds a little bit like equivocation, to which JRobin will not react well to that.
What I asked was if a human mind didn't have beliefs, right, would it be a mind?
No, you didn't ask that.
Well, okay.
Well, that wasn't the first thing you asked.
But I'll just
you asked that just now.
Then.
No. So you asked that just now, but originally that wasn't the question you asked. When I said mind, I defined mind, so there was no way I could have been equivocated.
Replays on in here. Yep.
Okay. Why don't we just replay it?
Well, you can't go back while the thing's going on right now.
Is that so?
That's to my understanding, yeah.
Is it?
Then they have a little conversation, but I forgot to give a shout out. TomTom34B, welcome. Clive Gordon, if I didn't give you a shout out before. Space Lord 75, I've highlighted a comment or two from you, but nice to have you here. And I wanted to say hi to, because I think I forgot him before, Viva Hernando, welcome. And Marty Camejo is here. Thanks, Marty, for showing up. Thanks for watching. Nice to have you.
Can anybody confirm that that's the case?
The replays don't post until after the room ends.
Oh, well, I'll wait for somebody to clarify that. But in any case, that's the question that I thought I asked, right? So if a human mind doesn't have beliefs, would it be a mind?
A human mind?
Yeah. If it had no beliefs.
Creaturely.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you, Randolph. And I think that's kind of where Jack is trying to take JRobin, and JRobin resists.
We're creaturely, so when it comes to our mind, we'd have propositional and non-propositional knowledge.
Right. So if we had no propositional states, would we be minds?
Yeah, because we have non-propositional knowledge.
So by non-propositional knowledge, you mean acquaintive and procedural knowledge?
Yeah, those could be categories of knowledge that would be applicable here. Yes.
So you're saying God has acquaintive knowledge?
Yes, God has knowledge of everything. When I say knowledge, okay, all I'm saying is that God has not necessarily access to the truth, but God would be the very foundation of truth itself.
Wait, I thought truth was a property of propositions.
Well, God would be, so truth, okay. So God would be the very foundation of that which is the case, okay, and that all things derive and depend upon God.
Wait, is truth not a property of propositions?
Yes.
It is a property of propositions.
Yeah, I misspoke.
Okay, but God doesn't have propositional states.
I just told you, I misspoke. So when I say that God has God is the very foundation of all that is, okay, all that can be, all that cannot be. God is a metaphysical foundation, okay? When God is a mind, when I say that mental or a mind, I'm saying that God is relational, he's revelatory, God is self-aware entirely, okay? That's what I'm saying.
Well, wait, I
So
got
God
a
is
little
not a
lost
God
there.
is not a God is not a rock. It's not conscious. God is not some sort of a non-mental entity.
Sorry, I got lost there. So is truth a property of propositions? I'm just trying to get clear because I didn't understand your answer. If you were saying
Yes,
no
I already
or
said.
yes. It is a property of propositions, right? Okay. So God has no propositional states, but somehow he's a property of propositions?
I just told you I missed. So did you not hear what I said? I retracted the statement I made earlier.
I'm just getting clear. You just said truth is a property of propositions,
Did
right?
you not? Did you not hear what I said?
I didn't understand what you were saying.
Okay, I told you I'm not. I'm retracting the statement when I said that God would be the truth in the sense that he's
God is
the
not the truth.
property.
Okay.
God is a property of propositions.
Okay, so
I
truth
just
is
told you
a
I'm retracting that
property.
statement.
Truth
I
is a
said that
property.
what I said, Jack, listen. What I said to clarify was that God would be the very foundation, that which is the case, that what can be, that cannot be, that everything that is the case is ultimately going to be derivative and dependent upon God himself. Okay? Now, you believe, I haven't gotten an answer to the question, Jack. You believe that God does not exist. You believe that this being, as I've defined, does not exist. So how does that follow, Jack?
Yeah, well, what
How
I
is it the case
said
that there's no God?
that my understanding of what a mind is that it is something that has contentful mental states, and by content I mean propositions, right? Now you're saying that God doesn't have propositional states, right? But presumably by that you mean he has so he has phenomenal states, and he has procedural knowledge, right? But he doesn't actually have any beliefs, right? Now, I could grant, for the sake of argument, that there could be a mind that lacked mental content, didn't have beliefs or thoughts of any kind, merely had sensations, and somehow had procedural knowledge, right? So it's hard for me to understand what it would mean to have procedural knowledge without propositional knowledge. But if that were the case, I'm just not clear on how God would be an agent.
Yeah, this actually gets a little weird because I can't remember what they're called, but there was actually one is it a sponge form? Eris? I can't remember what we call them. I'm not exactly sure what these things are called. Oh, slime mold. It's a slime mold. So there's one in Paris. It's they call it affectionately the Blob. It's a smart yet brainless organism. And there was an article on this back in 2019, and I thought this was kind of fascinating. But what they thought of this thing, I'll pull up the name of it. The Blob is neither animal nor plant. It's called Physarum polycephalum, Latin for the many-headed slime. It's classified as a type of slime mold. Scientists now consider the creature unrelated to fungi. So it's one of these things where it's just like, it's we don't know what it is. It's been around for maybe 1 billion years, but it has the ability to do some odd things. Like you can get it to, it can solve mazes if you provide it the right stimulus. Like if it needs food, I think it goes after like carbohydrates and starches. So despite having no mouth or stomach, the blob can detect and digest food. Oats, in particular, are a blob delicacy. It also boasts more than 700 different sex types, a reproductive strategy to prevent the organisms from mating with each other. The slime mold, which lacks a nervous system, is capable of advanced decision-making, learning, and long-term memory storage. It can find its way through a maze. It can construct efficient transport networks, sometimes better than humans. In a remarkable experiment published in Science, researchers in Japan found that a slime mold, I don't know if it was necessarily the same one, managed to configure itself into a near replica of the meticulously designed Tokyo rail system when introduced with an oat flake model of Tokyo and its surrounding metropolis. So it just followed the food around and worked its way through it. If you cut the blob into two, it can regenerate itself within 2 minutes. So through fusion, two blobs with the same genetic makeup can merge into one organism and share their respective knowledge. Very cool. If maybe that's the kind of God we need to be thinking about. Maybe that's why everybody's like kind of talking past Darth Dawkins and JRobins. They're talking about the ultimate slime mold that's responsible for all the universe.
Right? Which I thought was the central property of God, was that he's an agent. Because my understanding of agency
Jack,
is
all I'm hearing, Jack, all I'm hearing from you is your incredulity, the fact that you're ignorant about certain things, you don't understand. This is that you're complaining to me about the fact you don't understand. I want to hear your argument for how the case that there's no God.
yeah, my argument is that agency, that actions, which is something that agents undertake, actions are rationalized by beliefs and desires. Beliefs and desires are propositional states. Beings that don't have propositional states can't be agents and therefore can't rationalize actions.
How does
Since
that
you
follow?
agree,
Those are all.
it
What
follows
you're talking about. What you're
perfectly
talking
well,
about.
right?
What you're talking about. Again, are things.
When you start hear JRobin doing that incessant repeating thing like no, what you're talking about, what you're talking about, what you're talking about. Let me talk. Like you know he's starting to get triggered. Smoke's
You're
coming out
making
of his ears.
the horrible mistake that all atheists do, that I talk to, at least a majority of them, where you're now trying to you're putting God in the category of that which is a creature. You're putting God in a creaturely category, like we are, where we are, beholden to some other outer parameters, outer reality, not us being that which is metaphysically foundational, like God is. Okay, you're making that mistake. You're doing that. I think you know you're doing that, and I'm advising you to stop doing that.
What?
Yeah, that just seems to be an equivocation on mind, which was the point that came up earlier. So I'm just not seeing how you aren't equivocating. But leaving that aside, you said
Yeah. So JRobin's already starting to issue warnings now. Threats come later, probably. Where don't tell me I'm equivocating. Yeah, but you are. You want to say God's like this. This is the problem with some of the way these guys argue. It'd be one thing for you to suggest like, okay, well, God. Let's say that you're talking to a kid, right? And the kid wants to know what God is, and you say, well, God is like a mind but without a body, or something like that. Like a ghost or something like that. Um, this isn't a great explanation, but when you start saying something like God is like a mind or God is like something else, you're talking analogically, right? You're giving an analogy to something else. You can attempt to compare God to. It's going to be incomplete. It's not going to be 100% accurate. That's kind of the point of analogies, though, is to kind of put somebody in what you think is the best general direction towards a conceptual space for their mind. But that's not what JRobin and Darth Dawkins are doing. At least I don't know if Darth Dawkins is saying God is a mind and meaning like a mind. But in this case, JRobin is in a conversation with Angstreich where he's saying God is a mind. And Angstreich's taking him at his word and saying, okay, well, if he's a mind, minds have these kinds of, this is how we kind of define what a mind is. And JRobin, no, he wants to, pick and choose what it is and what it isn't. If he had said, no, it's like a mind in that it has these things in common, but it's not like a mind in other things, right? But maybe mind gets us analogically, closest to what we think God might be like. I don't know how Jack would react to something like that coming from, a theist, but I think that would commit the theist to, to something less fraught than what JRobin has jumped into here.
that you seem to think that the set of inferences that I made didn't follow. And I'm just not seeing what fallacy.
No, I told you. I told you. No, what I told you is that you're making the mistake. What you're invoking here. I'm gonna just mute you because you're making a lot of noise in the background while I'm talking. What I'm telling you is that you're making the mistake that the majority of atheists I talk to make, which is that you're conflating who God is. You're now construing God as something that is in the category of something like a creature, where we are now out. There is a outer reality outside of us that we are beholden to, and that we are. There's a foundation to the things that we have. When God Himself is the foundation. Okay, there is nothing outside of God that God is derivative of, or that is the source of God. God is contingent upon. There's nothing like that. What you're assuming, okay, in your lines of reasoning, is that very thing itself, because you're talking about God's, the reasons for God's things and God's thoughts, and that when God's doing actions, He's thinking propositionally, like we are. That's not what God. That's not what's happening here.
Sorry, I forgot to unmute right away. So this is what happens when I have to mute because I got to clear my throat or something, do something horrible, gross. But yeah, Red Robin. Yeah, it's hard not to say that when it's right there. Brenda did that in one of the videos she was doing. JRobin is saying like, oh, that's not what we're talking about here. Are we not talking about a mind then? Because if you want to say it's this, this, and this, but not that, that, and that, it's a mind. Okay, but a mind is this, this, and this. What are you doing? Because it doesn't sound like you're talking about a mind right now. It sounds like you're talking about something. And JRobin is even admitting that it's categorically different. He's just trying to do this thing. Well, it's a creator mind, not a creaturely mind. Okay. Well, in order for the word mind to really have any kind of explanatory significance in this conversation, you'd have to stick with the definition of what a mind is. If this creator being has a mind that's so completely different than a creature mind, then I don't think that you could call it a mind now. And if you try to call it a mind, you are equivocating. But JRobin takes accusations of equivocation personally for some reason. It's a little weird. He gets very triggered about that later.
That's not what God does. So you're doing a straw man attack.
Yeah. So that's why I said that. You just seem to be equivocating on agency.
Okay, if you tell me I'm equivocating again, we're gonna move on. Okay, because I just explained to you what I meant.
Well, I was just mentioning that in passing because the point that I wanted to address before getting to the equivocation was the fact that you said that you seemed to imply that the inference was invalid. You said, how does that follow, right?
After nearly 10 years listening to this community, I'm amazed how little this conversation has been elevated. It's such a grind, even after being away for a few years. Yeah, I would agree there a little bit, Rebel, because I think part of the issue is most of this is happening in a very small community, and the community kind of there's an ebb and flow into it over time, but it doesn't seem to really ever increase in size. I think the interesting thing about this would be to actually have a conversation because I think more and more a lot of whatever would be considered mainstream Christianity is changing quite a bit from whatever these guys are doing. And so this kind of, I think what makes these guys like JRobin and Darth Dawkins and some of them they end up becoming kind of the foils upon which everybody wants to. They're the people that everyone wants to defeat in an argument, is because they're coming with all the kind of traditional conservative political or cultural baggage that a lot of evangelical Christianities come with, and people want to kind of argue with that. If you end up getting into a discussion with somebody who's sort of a casual cultural Christian, especially if they're in kind of a more liberal church, none of this is really ever going to apply. Nothing about this would be that fraught. But at the same time, if you were to take a group of Christians from a church like that were relatively confident in their faith, but they were kind of like maybe not open theists, but the kinds that are like, maybe the Bible's not completely literal, and there's certain things in there that don't, there's obviously things in there that are not historically accurate. They're not biblicists, but they believe there's a God, they believe in the stories, they think there's a Jesus. But they're not as inclined towards these kinds of binary the necessary binary definitions that a lot of these guys in Discord and Clubhouse are obsessed with. If you combine the debate bro Christians with the kind of progressive liberal a little bit laid back Christians, it's like oil and water. And I think the reason that they tend to keep themselves, I mean, when they do, you see them come into contact with each other on places like Clubhouse. Every once in a while, you'll see them kind of to go at it. I think after clashing with each other, they usually end up. Usually, the more conservative one will accuse the other ones of not being genuine. They get. It's just like in politics. You're a rhino or a dino. Or I don't know, a kino, a Christian in name only. However that would work. And then they end up having to separate, and then they don't talk about each other. Then they kind of act like, it's weird because they kind of act like the other groups, like they know that there's Christians out there like that, but they don't talk about them. Because they like the fact that there are Christians, at least in numbers. Like, okay, you're Christian, you're helping our stats. You help the total population number for participating Christians, even though they don't think they're genuine. I think the actual conversation needs to shift to those groups. The idea that so many of these kind of conservative, hardcore, kind of autocratic, the totalitarian-minded Christians are obsessed with atheists is this sort of idea that they have to be on the vanguard to crush skepticism for the rest of Christianity. The problem is not skeptics. Skeptics make up a tiny, even though it's a large growing group of nuns, right? In the U.S., it's almost 30% now. It's probably going to get bigger. But nuns just means non-affiliated. It doesn't mean atheists. And in that group of nuns, some of those people are probably more inclined to become progressive Christians or sort of open theists. And so that for these guys is really their threat. This stuff that they're doing here is, I think, in a way, just kind of flashing out. I think they're missing the big picture. And I think they're actually damaging their religion more than they realize. But they want to be biblicists, and they want to be apologists, and they want to be, I really do think that there's something of a power trip in this for them. Not to psychologize too much. Anyway, I'll stop with that tangent and push on.
As if I had made some kind of invalid inference, but I didn't see any fallacy in the.
Okay, Jack, did you hear what I said?
Yeah, I heard you say, how does that follow?
So do you have a response to my objection that you're putting God into a creaturely category?
Yeah, my response is that when you say that, you just seem to be equivocating on mine.
Okay,
exactly.
Didn't I warn you against saying that, because I've now in detail numerous.
So JRobin needs to realize that, like, just because you warning someone about, like, if somebody tells you that you're equivocating, maybe figure out why do they think that you're equivocating. Now he's going to say how he's explained it away, and he hasn't.
Numerous times explained to you what I meant when I said God's a mind and God is this and that and the other. So I couldn't be equivocating here.
No, you are equivocating because you're trying to say that God is a mind. You wouldn't be equivocating if you said God's like one. God is something like a mind. Then you would get out of that. If you just want to be, if you just want to kind of, compare him analogously to a mind, that would be a little bit softer. But no, you're saying he is a mind. God is a mind, and not that he has one. He doesn't even commit to that. Like I think most people would, depending on the debate, would say, yeah, humans have minds. In other words, we have a neurological system and a brain and a physical body that supports it, and the mind, quote unquote, is an emergent property of that physical being. That's one theory of mind. It's the one that I tend to lean towards myself. But let's say that there's some kind of supernatural, absolute metaphysical foundation that is anything and everything that is extant, and a mind is an emergent property of that, and that's God, right? And they're simultaneous, right? Somehow, right? That there's a mind there. If you're going to say it is a mind, and a mind is defined as these things as needing like beliefs and desires and needing to have a world around it with which to interact, and it needs propositional states in which to it needs content in order for a mind to happen. It's interacting with the world around it, and you say no, that doesn't apply to this mind. You're equivocating. I mean, even if you were trying to do this as an analogy, it would start to break down quickly. But he's saying directly it is a mind, and now he's trying to tell Jack, no, because I've made the statement that it is a creator mind, it's different. That is equivocation, and it's interesting that he's like, no, Jack, I've explained to you why I'm not equivocating, and then equivocates. Hilarious.
If I'm defining my terms.
What is it?
Didn't I warn you against doing that?
See, but the point is, if you say a mind is something.
Jack, listen. I asked you a question. Okay, when I ask a question, I expect an answer. Didn't I warn you against saying that I'm equivocating?
When JRobin starts talking out his daddy pants and getting lectury, he's triggered.
Because I defined what I meant by mind, I defined what I meant by God, and I defined what I meant when I said that God is ultimate, the metaphysical foundation, and how God is different and distinct from creation, where we are beholden to other parameters and God is not. Did I not warn you against telling me that I'm equivocating? Because I explained in detail who God is and who we are and the difference between that. Did I not?
That's a great question, Goro. And it's actually kind of similar to what Alpha brought up here. But what serious adult speaks to another adult this way? Not a serious one. Possibly a damaged one.
warn you, Jack? You can unmute your mic.
Yeah, you've told me that.
Okay, good. So then you don't need to say that. Okay, you don't need to say I'm equivocating unless you have an objection to how I'm defining my terms, or if there's a contradiction in the definition here.
He's already described that. You said it's a mind, and then said that there are properties about that mind that are missing from the definition of mind. He's already explained this at least twice to JRobin, and JRobin is somehow saying, I'm not equivocating. That is equivocation.
Okay, I've defined my terms clearly, that God is that which is ultimate, the foundation for all of reality, okay, and that God is transcendent of all of these things.
He's transcendent of all of what things? The foundation of all reality? Not to get too nitpicky, but I'm gonna go back a couple seconds and play that again. Listen to how he says this. I'm probably being overly semantic.
I've defined my terms clearly, that God is that which is ultimate, the foundation for all of reality, okay, and that God is transcendent of all of these things.
Okay, he's ultimate. He's the foundation of all of reality, something like that, and he transcends all these things. All what things? All the reality that he's the foundation of? He transcends the thing that he is? That's a little sloppy. So no, JRobin, you're not being clear with your definitions. There's nothing really clear about saying that something is ultimate, right? Unless you're using it as a comparative term. It's the ultimate car, or he was the ultimate athlete. She was the ultimate scientist or something. However these things can be evaluated, you would use ultimate, right? In a comparative sense, you could use that. But using ultimate in the way that he's trying to say is basically like saying it's a se. It exists independent of anything and in and of itself. Okay. How would you? That's just an assertion that you make. There's really nothing that you can do to claim that. And to assert an ase being is really kind of unfalsifiable unless it interacts with the world around you, right? And these guys believe that, right? It did interact with something. As an ase being, it created things. Okay, so now we have a connection between this thing and the world that we have, which is all of creation. Well, but like from a definitional sense, a being that is independent and exists in and of itself, non-contingent of everything, is probably not something that we're going to be able to wrap our heads around, and is not something that could be demonstrated, at least from them. It wouldn't even be anything that you could verify. It's but sort of the problem with omniscience, or omnipotence. How would we, from our epistemology and our limited epistemology, with our capacity to know what we know, be able to verify that something knows everything or can do anything logically possible? We wouldn't be able to verify that, right? It's unfalsifiable for us. So these guys just assert it and say, well, this is the being that can do that. Great. Now, where is it? And what is it? Oh, it's a mind. But it's a mind missing key properties of what make minds minds.
And when we say that God is a mind, we're saying that God knows. And to say that God knows something, we're just saying God has apprehension of all things that are the case, and that's really all that is that's really all there is to be said about that. God is entirely self-conscious. God is revelatory. He's personal, relational. Okay, that's what we mean or denote when we say that God is the mind here. Okay, I've said this now probably 3 or 4 times at this point, or more, I'm assuming. Okay, so what is the issue, or if you want to call it if there's a contradiction, I'd love to hear it, in saying that there is no thing that the God exists? What is it?
Yeah, I just gave you the argument before, right?
Yeah, and I told you how your assumptions here were faulty, that you're conceiving of God in ways that are not in correlation with the definition here that I've presented.
So you're saying God is an agent, right? But he doesn't actually have beliefs and desires that rationalize his actions, right?
God is an agent in the sense that he can make choices. Now, the way that God makes choices is different because choices again entail some sort of a temporal action here. We think of God's choices.
So again, he has to begin equivocating on this. So Jack's question was I think was a pretty sound one, right? So you believe that he has agency and that he can do things, but he doesn't have the propositional states like beliefs and desires in which to determine why he's doing things. Right? Those are the things that we make choices on. What do I want to do? What should I do? Those kinds of calculations that a mind would do, right? And that's based on our interaction with content that we get from the world around us. This God created all that content and then sort of interacts with it, which is weird, but whatever. And now JRobin is trying to say, well, it doesn't choose things in the sense that we choose things because we choose things in a temporal way. Well, how is God going to choose an option when all options were created from him? They're all contingent upon him. He's not choosing a damn thing. He's more like a slime mold. Things are just sort of an emergent property of him. So this is getting very slippery for JRobin, and he's going to get more frustrated, I think, as this goes on.
In the realm of time, and because we're passing through time, and that we see God's providence in different ways. But God is God.
Yep, Tyler. Agency was part of JRobin's original definition. Now we have an agent that has no agency. Yeah, because now he wants to back off the whole. No. He makes choices, but not choices like we make choices, because those choices are temporal for us, but choices aren't temporal for God. Okay, and at that point, I'd be like, do you want to explain how you're not equivocating here? If it doesn't make choices that like choices, then it's doing something categorically different, right? If he wanted to say that there was a creator mind versus a creaturely mind, you're talking about two category differences. So maybe just change the word. Creatures have minds. God's something that transcends that. That would have gotten him out of it.
God is entirely free, to do things that are in accordance with his nature. The way that we explain that, I can't fully explain that because God is outside of time in that regard. God's not beholden to moments and that kind of thing. So I want to understand from you, how does it follow that there's no God?
Yeah, what I said is that choices are rationalized by beliefs and desires. You're denying that God has those things. So when you say God has choices, right, it just seems like you're just saying something that's unintelligible.
No, choices are not choices. To be a choice doesn't mean that you're rationalized by beliefs and desires. To be a choice means you're doing something as opposed to something else.
But we know that's not true because we know that in certain creatures, no one would when a jellyfish stings a creature. Jellyfish, from what I can understand, or maybe not all of them, but they don't make conscious decisions per se. It's just sort of like a kind of a wired instinct. And if they sting something, if they sting a person, or if they trap a fish or whatever and sting it and kill it for food, it's almost incidental. You could say it's a choice, but it's not really. It's more like a phenomenon that happens. And I don't know what JRobin's getting at here. And especially given that if you read the Bible, which is supposed to be special revelation, it's describing God's actions in the context of things like choices, right? JRobin believes, as most Christians of his ilk believe, that God does everything for his glory. Everything is being done for the glory of God, by God. That's part of his plan. So he's making choices based on that objective. So that would be a belief and a desire, right? His desire is to maximize his glory. And he chooses to do things which will lead to that. Now, they could then turn around and argue that there's all sorts of things. You could have a fallen world with a bunch of sinners that are terrible and harmful to people, and then you have to physically show up as a human being and die for their sins and resurrect and become another form of that God, and create all this crazy confusion in order to do what God's ultimate objective is, to maximize the good. JRobin in this discussion with Jack is implicitly denying that theological notion. He's acting like it doesn't exist. He's being dishonest.
Wait, a rock does something as opposed to something else when it falls, right? So that can't be what you mean by a choice.
No, when I say a mental object, there's intentionality as to what is going on. There's intentionality.
No, you denied that he has intentional states. Intentional states are propositional. You just denied that.
What I said was that God does not have propositions in mind that is required for his knowledge. Okay. What I mean when I say God is acting when God is doing something. Okay. God has certain things in mind. So again, I can't fully explain or fully articulate or exhaustively the nature of God's choices, because if I were to do that, I would be God himself. Okay. The point is that when God is acting, Okay, we perceive that again within time.
Wi-
We perceive God's actions in time, and that is simply how it happens.
So when God chose, okay, so the flood, right? A common Bible story that comes up in most of these debates. Hell, I was even talking about it yesterday. The flood. So the fact that the flood occurs during the days of Noah is incidental. God wants to do it. He's going to do it. The fact that it occurs in that moment in human history is incidental to God. That's what JRobin is essentially saying here. It's going to happen because God wills it to happen. The fact that it occurs at that particular point in time, that it looks like God made a choice. That doesn't just look like God made a choice. I was harping on this yesterday when I was from Genesis chapter 6. It lays out God's motives for doing it. Man was multiplying in those days, and they were giving birth to many daughters, and the daughters were pleasing to the eyes of the sons of God, who went down to the earth and had sex with them, had relations with them, and from their relations they produced the men of renown, the Nephilim were created from them. And when God saw this and saw that all humans were inclined to evil, he chose to wipe them off the face of the earth, except for Noah and his family, whom he deemed to be righteous. He decided in a moment he needed to take action against people and, quote, the sons of God who were mating with some of these people and producing Nephilim. It's right there in Genesis chapter 6, verses 1 through 8. You read that. That's how it gets set up. That's God's motive. So special revelation is describing a God that sees a scenario, rationalizes about it, realizes things are not going his way, and decides that he needs to wipe people out, save Noah and his family. Why? To maximize his own glory. That is the central theme that most Christians carry every time they read the Bible. So JRobin is arguing against special revelation here. Special revelation is describing a being who is making choices, looking at a situation, rationalizing about it, and deciding to take action in space and time. And now he's sort of describing, well, when God does something, like when it happens, it just happens for, oh, okay. So the flood was just a sneeze. And so what? So the Genesis story was just us projecting. We're just projecting God's motives and choices and decision making onto him. But that's not actually what it was. And that's just an approximation of what we think is happening. Okay. If JRobin wants to go with that, then that's going to really seriously change how anyone would look at anything happening in the Bible, how any story describes God talking to people, thinking about people, rationalizing or struggling with choices about people. Remember, he struggles with choices when he's dealing with the Israelites. With Moses, Moses talks him out of killing the Israelites. That's not even supposed to be possible. The fact that God's mutable, his mind can be changed, that's not supposed to be possible. And yet special revelation gives us a description of that event happening where a human that he's interacting with changes his mind.
Okay, that's how we perceive it. Now, I want to know from you, again, I've explained this 4 or 5 times. How does it follow that there's no God, Jack?
Yeah, well, I gave you that argument, right? So I take it that action is distinguished from behavior because action is a propositional state. It's rationalized by beliefs and desires, right? So when you say God performs actions but doesn't have beliefs and desires, which rationalizes actions, which is to say that
Again, you're doing the same mistake I warned you against doing already. Okay? When we say actions, we're perceiving those things within time, and you're doing so, you're equivocating between God as that which is ultimate, and you're now putting him to a category of that which is a creature or something that's contingent. Okay? God is not something that is making choices from moment to moment like we are.
yeah, I didn't say anything about that.
So why is he being described as someone who is in special revelation? If JRobin's if his explanation for that is, oh, well, that's just the way that's how we as humans understand it. Well, that's very interesting. But humans wouldn't have had to really lay it out that way. This is an enormous amount of special pleading. And how does JRobin establish the distinction between what about making choices removes something from being creaturely versus a creator in his mind? I don't understand this. Wouldn't a creator choose to create things in a particular way versus another way? Or was that not possible? If that's not possible, that means the creation happened the only way it could have, which means JRobin is nuzzling up to necessitarianism now. You're starting to get into this thing where God is reality, and reality is only the way that it can be, and it couldn't have been any other way, and God lacks agency, and God lacks choices. And if he's trying to say, no, that's not what I'm trying to, I want to have it both ways, you can't. At moments like this is where somebody like a Christian like JRobin should just embrace the fact that God is a mystery and lean into faith, and then quit Clubhouse and Discord.
I just said that actions.
Well, that's what the implication is here.
Derive it.
That God is acting in choices.
Deriving
because you're saying that you said that God makes choices, and that
I like that JRobin is getting worked up here now, like what Jack is talking about God makes choices, like he's starting to get into his preacher voice.
Those choices are rationalized.
You
by
said God
beliefs.
makes choices.
No, that's what you just said, that God makes choices, and that those choices are rationalized by thoughts and beliefs, as though there's some sort of discursive process.
See how he's doing this? He's trying to shift the burden over onto Jack is the one that's making the claim that this God makes choices. Jack was bringing it up, was like, oh, okay, so what you're saying is God makes choices, and then this, and this. JRobin is now trying to take that. I think he realizes that he's in trouble. He's trying to take that choice part and then shift it over, like as if Jack was the one that brought this up. Oh, if it's problematic, it's because Jack brought it up. This is cowardly bullshit from JRobin.
You said God makes choices, right?
Jack, do not overtalk. That you said that. No, I did not. If I said that.
Yeah, you did. Yes, you did, JRobin. You've said it many times.
You didn't say God makes choices?
I'm repeating back what you said. Okay.
Sorry,
when you
I'm
said that God makes
now.
choices,
When I asked you,
choices. All right, Jack. I'm gonna mute you. Maybe I was miscommunicating. When I say God makes choices, I'm not saying that.
Maybe you were miscommunicating. You're definitely miscommunicating. You're miscommunicating now.
The sense of us being, or him being in the category of us, because I made it clear that that's not what we're doing. That's why I also said I can't fully articulate it. So when I speak, I'm not speaking univocally or exhaustively about God. We can only speak analogically about God because that's the best we can do. So when there are certain times where I might be expressing something about who God is, and that's not going to be entirely exhaustive or be the best representation of that, what is the case. What I can do is clarify and make sure that the distinction between creature and creator is known. Okay, and so,
but the distinction, but that you haven't made that clear, other than to say God makes choices that aren't choices, I think, is what you're trying to say. Like God makes choices, but he's not committed to them. God makes choices, but they're not like human choices. God does things, but they don't happen in time. Well, they happen in time for us, but that doesn't mean anything for God. Okay, does that mean it's incidental for God when it happens? Because that's not how the Bible puts it.
But when I say that God is making choices, right, then I'm saying that God is ultimate. God is one eternal being.
What do his definitions have to do with whether or not he is making choices? I get that his definition would determine whether or not he can make choices. This is torture.
And the choices that he quote unquote makes
quote unquote
are eternal. God is one pure act, if you want to call it that, and there is nothing that is driving or influencing God outside or external to himself. Okay.
None of this matter. Okay, so let's say that. Okay, so God flooded Noah. God floods Noah. God will flood Noah. I'm just using Noah as shorthand for the people during Noah's time. Okay, so when God does something, it's tenseless, but for us, it happens in time. Great. God still. This is such a strange distinction here, and I'm trying to figure out exactly how he's going to. Because Jack's not going to do it. Jack's just going to stick with mind and agency. I would end up getting into a theological discussion on this and just be like, look, dude, okay, how do you square that with what the narrative is saying? Because he's no longer even approximate to how the Bible is describing what God does or thinks or wants. And God does want things. It wants at least one thing: to maximize its glory. that automatically, from a theological and a Christian perspective, refutes most everything of what JRobin has started talking about here. Right? He could actually support the claim that it's a mind. It does have at least one propositional. It has a belief and desire. It wants to maximize its glory. Okay, that's all JRobin would have to throw out, and that's a theological claim. He could slither around in that thing for hours and really not get cornered. He doesn't use that. He's just like, no, God doesn't have. He doesn't have motives, or he doesn't have beliefs and desires in the way that because those are icky human things. His stuff transcends that. Neat. Then don't call him choices. He's not down here in the muck having to make decisions like you and I do. Then he's not human, and he's not, whatever he's doing is not decision making. He's also not judging. He's also not providing mercy either. Right? The distinctions for anything that he does are starting to blow up. Right? If God doesn't flood Noah in a tenseless sense, does God save anyone in a tenseless sense? Does it matter when Jesus showed up?
Okay. God is eternal. God is ultimate, foundation to all of reality, and God is entirely and unconditionally non-dependent upon anything else. God is not making choices in the same way that we are making choices. Okay, that should hopefully clear it up.
So when for God so loved the world that he gave his only son, that wasn't a choice. To give his son. He didn't choose to do that. It was just, if somebody theologically wants to no, it was all part of the plan. Okay, then don't say don't say it's because he loved the world. No, it's not. It's to maximize his glory. This was all part of his plan. I don't know who he's maximizing this glory for, himself. I mean, is God just the ultimate foundation, as an ultimate foundation, and he's just trying to please himself? He's just pleasuring himself. God is a slime mold and a wanker.
So again, the question is being posed for probably the 8th time at this point. How do you rationalize your atheism?
Yeah, so I asked you.
JRobin, you have provided numerous ways for people, just in the first 20 minutes of this conversation, for people to rationalize their atheism. I've been able to do it comparing what you've been saying with what I know about the Bible. And Jack has already presented an argument which rationalizes his atheism from what you've presented. And I think he's going to do it again.
Right. In virtue of what is God an agent?
I'd like an answer to the question. Don't tell me what you asked me. I'd like an answer to the question, Jack. Go ahead.
That's just a distraction. I mean, when JRobin does, that is nothing more than an argument. I want an answer to my question. I want you to repeat what I said. Part of his answer is to call back to something that you said. There's nothing wrong with putting an answer in context, JRobin. Grow the fuck up.
Go ahead.
So what about atheism are you trying to expose?
Hold on a minute, Samuel.
Yeah.
Actually hold on. We're trying to keep this going on right now. So I'm going to move you back down. If you want to come up later, you can. So Jack, how does it follow that there's no God, Jack?
Yeah. So my answer to that question is, right, that an agent is a being that makes choices, and a choice is something that is rationalized by beliefs and desires. Now, you originally said God makes choices, and that's all that's required for agency, right? That making choices doesn't presuppose having beliefs and desires, right? And so then what I tried to understand is how you distinguish between agency and mere behavior if you don't appeal to propositional
So what I said as a clarification was that God is, because I hold to divine simplicity, meaning that God is one pure act, and that which is foundational to all of reality is simple, not composite. And we may perceive certain events in time that we may attribute to God as those events, in time, but those are not exhaustive representations of God's character or nature. Okay? So when you say God,
exhaustive representation of his character and nature, no one's saying that. They wouldn't have to be. Just like my choice, if I made a decision to eat a salad for lunch or a sandwich for lunch, is not exhaustive of my character. Jack isn't. No one's saying anything like that. I'm starting to get lost in this, and I've watched this before.
God makes choices. I'm speaking in a temporal sense, okay, for the sake of understanding. I've heard that before.
Well, what's the
So how does it follow
non-temporal sense?
that doesn't exist?
Yeah, well, I don't. It follows because choices are a temporal notion, and so if God is atemporal, he can't make choices. Now you're saying
Exactly.
he makes atemporal choices, right? And you're saying that's an analogy, and it doesn't seem like there's anything in virtue of which that analogy holds.
Exactly.
Which
Exactly.
just seems to mean that you're saying something. Sorry, did that come through?
Okay, am I coming through?
Now you are.
Okay. Yeah, that's not the issue here. When I said that, I made this clear again for the third time. If I have to keep repeating myself and it becomes clear that you don't know what you're talking about and that you're not interested in listening and understanding what I'm telling you, then we're gonna move on. Okay, because there's plenty of other people in the room, I'm sure, who want to talk now at this point.
I find it weird because, I mean, there have been conversations that I've heard back in the past, depending on the philosophical topic, where I've gotten a little bit lost in what Jack is trying to say. Either because it was a particular topic that I wasn't aware of and didn't totally understand like the content, or and maybe it had a little bit more jargon in it, some terminology that I wasn't familiar with. And I do my best to try to make sense of it, but I wouldn't. But like, let's say that was the case, right? If I was in JRobin's shoes and he was giving me something that I didn't agree with, I would ask him to clarify, or I would ask to get him to break it down. But what Jack is actually offering here is the breakdown. It's the broken down version of this. Is not it really isn't that complicated as far as a lot of these philosophical discussions can get. And it doesn't, Jack is not trying to do, because Jack has been accused, along with some other guys like that, where they can use a little bit too much philosophical jargon, or try to hold somebody to deductive syllogisms or something like that, kind of weaponize philosophy against them. In this case, it doesn't feel like that's what's happening here. He's giving a pretty much straightforward, you want to talk about choices and minds and agencies and stuff, and he's trying to get to a definition of what those are. And JRobin keeps dodging and keeps avoiding committing to a definition of what those things are. The only thing he commits to is that he wants to say that God's a mind, but not commit to all the properties of whatever a mind might be. He wants to commit to the notion that God wills things into existence, but that doesn't involve belief states, desires, and choice making. It's this. I mean, this is a remarkable display of just machine gun special pleading from JRobin.
When I say that God makes choices, I'm speaking with respect to how we perceive them, okay, in time. I made this clear in the distinction between creator and creation, where we exist and are extended within time, and God is not. Okay, so that's what I mean when we say choices. Now, if you're gonna conceive of choices only in the temporal sense, or choices, I would say, only in the creaturely sense, then we're not gonna be able to get anywhere, because we can only speak analogically of God. Anyways, we can only speak of God how God is.
Okay, so you can only speak analogically of God anyway. All right, so when you're comparing God to a mind, right? If you are going to do so analogically, you could say, well, God's like a mind except for these kinds of things, right? When somebody pushes back on it, like I said, well, it's like a mind in the sense that it can do this, this, and this, but it's not like a mind and it can do that, that, and that. And then when somebody asks, okay, so what do you really mean by it? Well, I don't know. I mean, maybe a mind is the closest that we can get to it. JRobin could take this down, several degrees if he wants to. But he wants to come in hot, and he wants to rhetorically pwn someone on the internet and prove that he's right about the Jesus, and so he can't do that. So now he said, yeah, okay, we are having an analogical, conversation. Great. Okay, but the mind one is starting to break down, trying to compare God to a mind, especially when you just say God is an immaterial mind, not God is like some kind of immaterial mind. God is a mind. All right. And then it doesn't have the capacity, it doesn't have the conditions that make a mind. I don't think that God really has beliefs or desires. Like, no, that doesn't make any sense, because God does. If you want to know what God's desires are, all you have to do is start reading books in the Bible to find out what God wants and desires about things. He clearly didn't want most of the people that were living in Noah's day and age, so he killed them all. That's what he wanted. He wanted to start a new covenant with a new family of righteous people, Noah and his family. So he had a desire. Ultimately, his desire is to glorify himself, to maximize his glory. This isn't that complicated. I wish sometimes I kind of wish Christians would go back into the theology stuff and maybe take their foot off the gas on the philosophy stuff, because they keep trying to slam the two together, and it's not an attractive pairing. It's just not pretty.
Revealed himself, and I'm speaking of God in the sense that we know what he does in virtue of how we're looking at them. Okay, so I made that clear already.
Oh, well,
Now,
actually, what I said
do you
was,
have a response to that, Jack?
yeah, what I have the same response that I gave before, which is that you haven't specified in virtue of what the analogy holds.
Exactly.
Because I'm saying that when we look at God's actions, we're looking at them within time, a temporal sphere. Okay, meaning that these actions occur, and there's a moment-to-moment procession of certain events that occur, and that we may think of them as choices analogically, but they're not the same way. They're not the choices in the same way that we would think of them, exhaustively or univocally in our sense. Or we're making decisions moment to moment, and those decisions are based upon some sort of a discursive or inferential line of reasoning.
This doesn't make any sense. Like let's say for a second here, we have a being that has always existed, and it's just always been. What JRobin seems to be arguing here is that from God's perspective, when he makes choices or does things like that, it's not exactly like us, because we exist in a temporal space. Granted, but this God created that temporal space, right? He created space and time for his. Well, that was the first part of the creation, right, and everything within it. So that's reality, space and time, and all of the creatures, especially humans, his extra special creatures, are existing within that. So when he makes choices about things that are happening within that space and time, they're temporal. Now he may not experience them that way, but this is such a confusing way of putting this. Like it's almost meaningless to talk about like the fact that God is eternal in this sense. Like, well, if you think, it's almost like he's talking about God's subjective experience of no time in relation to the decisions he makes with regards to the creatures that exist within the spatio-temporal bubble that he made. If he's making decisions about us within that bubble, they're happening temporally. I don't know how you get out of that.
Yeah. So what's the common property then?
The fact that they are current. Well, all I'm saying by choices is that we are perceiving certain actions that God does within time. That's what I say when I say God makes. That's what I say. That's what I mean when I say God makes choices.
Yeah. What's the common property?
Did you understand what I just said, Jack?
No, because I'm trying to understand. Okay. I asked you what the common property is.
I'm going to explain it again. When I say God makes choices, I'm describing certain actions that we may say God providentially making. Okay, these actions that are occurring, and we are perceiving them from a moment to moment procession of events. Okay, that there is a moment to moment succession of events, and that we are perceiving them through time. Okay, so when we say God makes the choice to.
That's interesting, Lucky. Jack had this exact conversation with Colin Pearson years ago. And I think Colin Pearson was actually the first precept I ever saw on YouTube. Yeah, that's interesting that he's revisiting this topic. Actually, I'm a little bit more interested in the fact. I don't know. I think JRobin, has gotten into this because he admitted in a video or two a while ago, a few weeks ago, he sort of recently embraced the concept of divine simplicity, that God is simple, not complex. So I think that's starting to affect the way he's approaching some of these arguments. And I think Colin Pearson was one of those divine simplicity types too. Not that there's necessarily a connection with that. A lot of these guys can hit the same points regardless.
Flood the earth. If somebody wanted to say that, then we are looking at that in the sense of a temporal notion. That's a temporal notion. But we're not speaking univocally of God in that sense, because God is ultimate, pure act himself. Okay, so I want to know from you, now that you understand, or you should understand, what I mean when I say God makes choices, and that I'm not speaking exhaustively or univocally about God. I'm only speaking in the sense that we are understanding certain actions in a temporal sense. Okay, now that you understand that, do you have a reason or a foundational, or not foundational, but do you have
I love it when they do this. Darth does the same thing. You explain a point and then you tell them that they understand it. That's the same way as saying that you're automatically right. Right? If I this is going back to somebody's comment earlier. What adult talks to other adults like this? Like you have to learn this from like these kinds of communities, these kind of like these weird narcissistic d-bags that get on here and act like this. Now that you understand me, now you can engage in my argument. Like I don't understand. Like I'm trying to understand you because what I think I understand, I disagree with. Right? It's just that simple, right? But JRobin will take that. Whoa, you can't disagree with me because I'm right. Oh, I didn't realize. I'm sorry. I thought we were having a conversation here.
a reason or a justification for how it's the case that there's no God? You're muted, Jack. Unmute your mic.
Jody, does divine simplicity make things more or less confusing? I'm guessing the former. For me, yeah, definitely the former. Mostly because like the funny thing about hearing guys talk, especially when they get into the divine simplicity arguments, there's things about divine simplicity that have some really weird philosophical entailments, but they also have some they have some crazy theological entailments too, and the philosophers will debate about them all the time. It's one of those things where I was fascinated with when I first heard about the concept of it because growing up as a Christian church, it was a concept I never heard about. But it is something that if you go to seminary, you end up hearing about it. And I think you probably end up hearing about the concept regardless of any seminary that you go to. Like it's something that ministers and pastors probably ought to know about just in case it comes up, especially from one of their parishioners. Is it something that's talked about during a sermon on a Sunday? Nope. It's not presented to lay people in churches. Amongst many of these concepts. Most of these concepts are just not usually dealt with in a Sunday morning sermon. Sunday morning sermons don't do this. Even Sunday schools don't deal with this stuff. I never got any of this stuff when I was going to church for years. I didn't hear about this stuff until I was an atheist.
Yeah, because you're saying that you're speaking analogically, and for an analogy to hold, there has to be a common property.
Did I not explain what choice meant?
I asked you what the common property is.
Did I not explain to you what choice meant, Jack?
You appealed to an analogy, and I asked you what
Did I
the
not
common...
explain to you, Jack? Did I not explain to you what choice meant in this case?
I like how he it's like the verbal equivalent of like patting someone's head. Jack, let me talk.
Well, my understanding was you appealed to analogy.
Did I not explain to you 5 seconds ago what choice meant, Jack? Unmute your mic.
Sorry, yeah, you said something which was a response. As far as I could understand,
did I not explain to you? Did I not explain to you? I don't want to hear the childish answer. Did I not explain to you what I meant when I said God makes choices?
Yeah, you explained that there's an analogy between human choice and divine choice. Isn't that correct?
Okay. Did I not explain to you? I want to get a yes or no answer.
This is so dumb. So Jack, this is where JRobin, amongst many of these guys, demonstrates this common allergy they have for clarifying questions. All Jack is asking him is a simple clarifying question, and JRobin is acting like, oh, this is another dodging technique. Like if you don't want them to dodge, if you do not want your opponent to dodge, answer their clarifying question. Because when you don't, it makes it look like you don't have an answer to their clarifying question, and it starts to make it look like you don't know what you're talking about, which is something that most people assumed probably about 7 minutes into the 27 minutes that you guys have been talking so far.
Question. When you said yes, are you affirming that I explained to you that I described what I meant when I said God makes choices?
I'm affirming that you gave an analogy. Am I mistaken?
No, I explained to you what I meant, but definitionally what I meant when I said God makes choices.
So it wasn't an analogy.
Did you understand what I just said?
Well, when you gave...
So yeah, I think it's pretty clear at this point. JRobin does not know where Jack is. See, this is the thing. It sounds like JRobin is acting like Jack is leading him somewhere. Like if he answers Jack's question, he's committing to something, which he would be. But Jack is literally trying, like, did you give an analogy or did you not give an analogy? What are you doing? And the fact that JRobin is like, no, I'm not going to answer that because it's going to commit me to something means either he knows that he's misleading Jack and he doesn't want to admit it, or he doesn't know what he's doing. My guess is he doesn't know what he's doing.
Gave a definition. Was that definition an analogy or not?
Did you explain to me what I just said? Or sorry, did you understand to me what I just said?
You said that you gave a definition.
Yes,
So you
when I said
didn't
that,
appeal to an
I explained to you what it meant or what I mean when I say that God makes choices. Do you understand that?
So that was a univocal predication.
Did you understand what I said?
That's
Do you
getting a
understand
little
what I said
fancier.
I understand the words, but I don't understand
Okay,
whether
good.
you were
So when I say
appealing
God,
to
so
an
when
analogy.
I say Jack, you're gonna have to bear with me, please. I want to understand from you the outstanding question here, which is how is the case that there is no God? I've defined what I meant when I said God makes choices. Okay, this is not an exhaustive.
You haven't defined it to Jack's satisfaction because now it sounds like he's trying to figure out, what did he say, a univocal, I can't remember the word he used there, versus an analogy. And JRobin doesn't seem to commit to this. My guess is because he probably doesn't know the difference, which is fine. If he that would be fine as long as he just said, I don't know the difference. Like, what do you mean by the difference between an analogy and a univocal proposition? Is that what he said? I'm not going to rewind it, but it was something like that. So, okay, find out what the difference is. What does Jack mean about the distinction between the two? And then, go from there. Maybe don't always act like it's a trap.
This is not.
Or don't be afraid to fall into traps, right? You're saved. Don't worry about it. Right? This is just a conversation. Or is it it's the debate to end all debates, I guess. This was JRobin's one chance offering to Jack to defeat him, I guess. Remember at the beginning, he's basically like, I'm never talking to you again. Or probably won't talk to you again. He doesn't say never.
Exhaustive explanation, of course, because I'm not omniscient. I don't fully understand how God's eternality, I can't fully explain that. But that doesn't necessitate that God doesn't exist. That's not going to give you license to say in an ipso facto that God doesn't exist on that basis. So I want to know from you, how does it follow that there is no God now that you understand all the groundwork and all the terms that have been laid out?
No, but I did.
See, you did it again. Now that you understand all the groundwork, now that you understand, you have this kind of, I don't know where they got this from. I know Darth does this. He uses this kind of language before. Abusers do this kind of thing too if they're trying to manipulate you, because they'll tell you, like, I know that you understand this. If you come at me with anything else, it gives me justification for accusing you of being a liar. Right? It's a great way to gaslight somebody. Right? But he's not offering Jack he's not giving Jack what Jack is looking for. Jack wants an answer to this. Are you providing an analogy or not? And even what JRobin explained there it sounds like he's still waffling on he doesn't want to commit to either one.
Didn't understand the terms.
Okay, so what term didn't you understand?
I didn't understand what you mean by choice.
Okay, when I said that God makes choices,
Mm-hmm.
I want you to listen very closely. I'm going to say it slowly for you, okay? I'm going to say it slowly, and I'm going to break out the markers and crayons for you, okay? When I say God makes choices, I'm saying that we experience certain things that God may do through time, and we may perceive them as choices in the way that we through time may come to decisions, okay, and that we may base those decisions off of reasoning and then act on that.
We don't. I mean, the choices are usually based on them anyway. We don't decide we don't choose to base our choices on our reasons. But no, choices are made based on our reasons and desires, right? We're rationalizing about the world around us, so we have certain desires that we want to maximize and certain things we want to avoid. We make choices to hopefully, maximize the potential of the outcomes that we want, right? And they're made temporally. So how is it that God is making choices based on that kind of definition? What is he doing, right? Because it seems like JRobin doesn't want to, he definitely doesn't want to commit God to being confined in any operation to time. And he seems to want to avoid the fact that God has beliefs / desires. So what do you do with choice after that? Now you're talking about a being performing actions independent of anything that we would consider choice. I'm going to go with slime mold. I'm going to go right back to slime mold. It's just following an oat trail because the oats are nummy.
Okay. That's what I'm saying. Okay, so we compare God's choices to our choices in the sense that God is doing some sort of action that we may be doing here. Okay, and that that action is not something that we base, of course, in a temporal fashion. God is not discursively.
Okay, I might rewind that again. Somebody asked me a question here. Jefferson, have you made it to vlogging / reacting to TR's one-way video yet? No, I haven't. I definitely will be covering it. It's a long one like this one. I may not get to it until, well, I might be able to. It might be one that I can do on Wednesday. I'm going to have a free day coming up. I might be able to do it then. But no commitments yet. That's a longer one too. That one's one way, talking with Tom Rabbit, Realistic Nihilist, and Danny. I'll kind of go after him. I think that one's a little bit over an hour. It's going to take a little bit of time to go through. It is worth watching if you guys haven't watched it. I know a lot of people have watched that one about One Way's wife coming to defend, sort of the unexpected white knight video where she's yelling at her husband. If you've seen that one, then yeah, you probably ought to watch the one that preceded it if you've got the time. One Way just kind of face plants on the definition of validity and soundness. It gets really weird, and it's very frustrating. But it's kind of worth going through because there's a few points made through that. I will definitely be doing it. It will be coming soon. Hopefully, I don't have to wait until next weekend to cover it. I can get to it some night later this week.
Reasoning here, but we are nonetheless calling it a choice because we're conceiving of God as that which is doing certain things in history. Okay, so I want to know from you, now that you understand what choice means, how does it follow that there's no God?
Well, so you're saying God doesn't make choices, right? That only human beings make
How does it follow
choices.
how does it follow that there's no God, Jack?
Yeah, because a God is an agent.
I like so Jack is engaging with all the stuff that JRobin just said, and JRobin's reaction is to dump it and repeat the simplified question he'd asked from the very beginning. Classic. Like, you might as well just say, oh, all that stuff that I just spent 3 minutes telling you. Yeah, forget it. I wasn't being serious. How is it there is no? Why? You give me a reason why there ain't no God, huh? Come on, let's keep it simple.
An agent is a being that makes choices. God doesn't make choices, so God can't be an agent. So it follows
Jack,
that God does not exist.
I've already laid the groundwork for you of what I mean by these things. I want to understand how this follows that there is no God. I didn't say God doesn't make choices.
You the entailment.
God doesn't make choices in the way that we make choices.
In what sense does he make choices?
If you're gonna say that,
in what sense does he make choices?
Then we're not. Listen, I'm explaining something to you. When we say God does these things, we're not speaking in the sense that we do them. Okay?
Yeah. So again, you're making the same.
That's exactly. Essentially, that's all that Jack would have to be doing at this point. Like you're saying that he does these things, and you're saying that he is these things. But then when pressed to give details about what we mean by what he is and what he does, the more JRobin is questioned about that, the more JRobin starts talking about what it is and what it isn't, and what it does as not those things. Like it's a mind, but it's not. It chooses to do things, but it doesn't. Okay, like it like this is the weird thing about it, because like if you ask, and I've done this before, I've asked many Christians, like, can God choose to do something, right? And they're like, well, and they don't want to say, no, God can't choose, right? Because God can do anything, right? So what they'll say is like, well, God doesn't need to, right? Which is just beautiful. Like, okay, that's fine. But it follows from what you're talking about that if we live in a world provided by God where we have a subjective experience in a mind and an external reality provided by it. Okay, if you want to assume the Christian worldview or assume Christianity is true or any theistic belief, we can make choices based on the fact that we have limited knowledge and we're trying to act on our beliefs and desires within that world. That's how choice happens. The fact that actually, there's an interesting thing about this too, because there's a philosophical distinction between choice and decision. Not a lot of philosophers make it. I just watched this. It was on Carneades. And the idea was that a choice was something a little bit more instinctual, something you didn't deliberate on. Kind of like a knee-jerk reaction. Do I want the am I wearing my green cap out, or am I, wearing a scarf or something like that? You don't really think about it. And a decision is something more deliberative, where you spend some time and you lay out your reasons, do maybe a pro and con list. That's a decision. But the interesting thing about that is, in decision making and choice making, is that some of the stuff is some of it can be hypothetical, but some of it can also be, you could make a choice to do something conditionally outside of time, right? Like it wouldn't, like if I don't even know how anyone would put this, but like if I were in that situation, I would choose to do this, right? Right. And you could kind of hold it in your mind as a belief that if those circumstances were in place, I was in that scenario, I believe I would make this choice. Right. Now, obviously you're not making that choice, but you believe you might, right? Sorry, I'm getting into a weird tangent here. Is that the kind of thing that maybe God's doing? No, of course not. Of course not. JRobin wants to be able to say that God will do things, God does things, and God has done things all at the same time. It's all tenseless, right? So choice doesn't really apply. The problem with that is that starts to break down concepts of agency, which is what Jack has been talking about, right? In order to be, have agency, just basically, it chose to create us, right? At some point, if you don't want to use the word choose, then what's going on here? What is it? It sounds like he's talking less and less about an anthropomorphized being that has these powers. I'm the more and more I think about it, I'm starting to think that these guys need to bow the knee, and they need to recognize the real presence of our Lord and Savior, Slime Lord.
Making the same. Wow, Jack, you have no self-control, do you? When we talk about God,
you have no self-control. See, now he's starting to slip in the insults. Like, for JRobin, an absence of self-control is a big one that he likes to throw in there, which I would say JRobin demonstrates quite a bit. He does not have a lot of self-control. Being able to engage with someone who's asking you direct questions about the claims you've made would demonstrate self-control. Insisting that they understand what you mean, and then ignoring their retort only to retreat back to simplified questions, that demonstrates a lack of self-control. It's not a good look, JRobin. I agree. Self-control is not cool, but
we speak about God first and foremost as that which is ultimate. Okay, God is not in the category of a creature. God is mere and pure and simple act itself. Okay, God is just pure act. Okay, so I want to know from you. This is why I'm telling you that we don't conceive of God as choices in that sense. When I say choice, I'm just referring to how God may act in certain times and places. So maybe that was a mistake on my, or that was a mischaracterization on my part. But I've tried to make sure it's clear, okay, that I don't entirely mean choice in the sense that we make choices in which we're using discursive reasoning to come to certain conclusions, and then from there we take action. Okay, that's not what I'm saying here. So I've described to you what I meant for the umpteenth time.
Has he?
Do you have a response for how it is the case that there is no God?
Yeah, I've given you the entailment multiple times. What the way that
So
you
I just described to
respond.
you. So if you're gonna tell me that God makes choices, and by choice
No,
you're
I'm saying
referring
he
to some sort
doesn't
of
make
debate.
choices.
If you're going to say choice and the way
I'm
that we're
saying he
talking
doesn't
about
make
it,
choices, right? I'm
wow,
agreeing.
Jack, wow. Okay, so
If JRobin's saying wow at this point, it's because he might actually be surprised at this. Because remember, he tried to fit Jack with the whole God makes choices thing, and Jack's like, no, I'm trying to give you what I think, why it's entailed that there is no God, because the definition that JRobin is giving him is so bad, right? It entails that God's not real.
if we're gonna say choices in the way that we're talking about choices,
I shouldn't say not real. I should say it doesn't follow that there's a God based on, the properties that JRobin's attempting to lay out.
here, then you're just going to be simply mistaken. You're just going to be trying to defy God out of existence. But that's not what we're talking about here. Okay.
Yeah, this is the thing too. I think this Jack Burton says God is pure act. What the fuck does that even mean? Yeah, he actually gets into this might be the video where he admits like he's gotten into like divine simplicity, and he attempts to use this a little bit. I think this actually irritates Jack a little bit when they start to kind of. I think Jack attempts to drill down on this.
It's a very simple concept to understand. This is not convoluted. This is not complicated. This is very simple. Okay. And so when it comes to
This is interesting. So, Perker, do you think this, now that you understand shtick, comes from their need for special revelation from God to be perfectly understood and received by the biblical authors? Yeah, that might be. I kind of wonder if somewhere there's a seminar where one of these ghouls, like, and I apologize for anybody who likes him, because I've heard, he can be a nice guy. Saitan Brukenkate used to be the most obnoxious guy, peddling this shtick on the internet, and he was a ghoul about it. He was a dick, but he would do seminars where he would tell people techniques about how to do this, and sort of like he was like diet Greg Bonson. But yeah, I think maybe that's part of it. I think that's informing some of it, but I also kind of think somewhere out there's a little tract or pamphlet or book that tells them that they should say this kind of stuff. And I'm sure it probably says, like, look, by saying this, what you're doing to them, you're actually doing the non-believer a favor. But this kind of basic bitch inquisition nonsense has been around for forever, and so they just kind of package the same kinds of torture techniques into some passive aggressive mode of rhetoric. So yeah, probably they're like, no, it's been revealed to you, because what I did is, as an agent of the Lord, I explained everything there, and as a creature created by God, you have just been, by virtue of me explaining things to you, have been subject to God's revelation. Neat. If one of them actually went out on a limb and said it that way, I'd be like a pig in fresh shit with that one. Oh man, that would be something special. I wish one of them would actually commit to that, but I don't think they will.
God's action, God is pure act, God is simple, he's not composite.
God is simple. So
or conceivable.
so this is one of those things that I talked about before. Like, is God a choice or a consequence, or is he both? Is he an action, or is he the choice to act and the action? And in this case, JRobin seems to be saying, well, he's not so much a choice as he is act. He is pure act. It happened, not it was decided upon and then acted upon, right? God does not assess. God just does.
Of God is that which is ultimate, at least. And that's all that is to be said. That's all that there is to be said about that. So if you want to take agency to mean choices in the way that we're talking about it, then no, God wouldn't be making choices in the humanly or creaturely categorical sense. But that's never been the position that I've asked you to respond to. It's never been my position. And so this whole time
Never
you've been
been
responding to a position I haven't been asking you about. So I want to hear again from your worldview. How does it follow that there's no God, Jack?
Well, if you're saying that God doesn't have a mind and he's not an agent, right, then it's just not clear what's even being refuted, right?
I didn't say God is not a mind. And I told you what I meant by agency. And I also gave other properties, like God is
No, you didn't
revelatory,
say
God is
what you
personal.
meant by agency.
Yeah, when Jack attempted to challenge him on what he meant by agency, he didn't like the fact that Jack was going into this kind of, well, I think Jack was accusing him of equivocation on his definition of either choice and mind. But I think agency, JRobin was even flabbier with.
Said
Okay,
that we
Jack,
compare human.
Jack, please don't overtalk. Okay. I've explained to you.
Yeah, you've already said that you've explained it to him. Why don't you let Jack actually finish his rebuttal?
What I meant by all of the terms I've used here: ultimacy, God being a mind, God being making choices. Okay, and I said that we're not speaking entirely or exhaustively about God when we explain God's eternal nature or character. We can only speak by virtue of what God has revealed, for one. And when we say God makes choices, we're talking in the sense of how we perceive God's actions through time.
Ah, okay. So when the authors of the Bible were writing stories about God, and that is special revelation, the reason that's why we say God has choices is because that appeals to our epistemic limitations. Okay, so we're going to end up having issues with that if that's incomplete. If you're going to try to say, like, well, we say that God makes choices, but what it actually is it seems like God makes choices. God is actually pure act. Okay. At what point? I mean, JRobin's definitions and his this kind of special twist that he's putting on all the definitions is lining up perfectly with how I would defend pantheism. A universe that is God. The problem is that it's consistent with me because that God doesn't need to be personal, right? It's pure act, right? It's interacting with humans, but it doesn't choose to. That's not how this being works. It's atemporal. It's spaceless, right? And everything that happens is a consequence not only of it's pure act and it's pure being. It doesn't decide. It doesn't choose like we think. We just think it's choosing those things because it's part of it being, right? All right. Well, how is that any different than just the universe is this God and has these properties, and then we just worship it? In the universe, at some level, there's some kind of quantum slime mold that undergirds everything in reality, and that's what happens. That seems to be the God. That's the God that I'm getting from what JRobin's laying out here. I hope he's comfortable with being a blasphemer. Sorry. Even I couldn't say that with a straight face, but he is being blasphemous here.
That's what I've said. That's the position I've maintained. That's the position I've always held to. At least, no, I haven't always held to it, but this is the position I've held to in recent weeks or months. That God is that has these positions, or God has this nature and attribute.
Yeah, be careful there. God has taken these positions. Whoa, what do you mean he's taken positions? You mean he's made decisions?
So I want to know from you, how does it follow that there is no God?
Yeah, so God is an agent. You're saying God, that we perceive God as making choices, which is what agents do. But in fact, that's a mere perception. And in fact, God doesn't really make choices, right? And since an agent is a being that makes choices, if God is an agent and doesn't make choices, it follows that God cannot exist if agency is an essential property of God.
I explained to you why agency is an inadequate. If you're going to conceive of agency as God making choices in the discursive sense, but that would be an inadequate.
What's the non-discursive sense?
I just told you God is not.
What's the non-discursive sense?
God is not reasoning. God is a pure act itself.
What's the non-reasoning?
God is not reasoning. God is not reasoning. God is not reasoning.
Yeah, what's the non-reasoning sense of agency?
All right, Jack. I told you I was gonna keep you on a short leash, and it's starting to run out right now. Okay.
I just want to say, JRobin's definition of a short leash. First of all, if you have a conversation with somebody, you really need to keep them on a short leash. Should you have to do that, right? And Jack has not talked that much in this. JRobin has done most of the talking throughout this entire thing. So JRobin, you're demonstrating a lack of self-control, my man. Also, this the non-discursive sense. I'm not exactly sure where Jack is going with that, but JRobin's reaction to that there was a little bit of a pause there, and I thought that was kind of funny because he's like, it almost felt like, wait, did I get caught out in something?
I just explained it to you, what we're talking about when you say that God makes choices. I just explained that to you. And so
right, and what about the way Jack reiterated it didn't make sense? Jack paraphrased it and said, okay, what you're saying is God doesn't make choices in the sense that we make choices. God acts and we perceive them as being choices. So him being an agent really doesn't follow. So JRobin wants him to I want to be able to say that he's an agent, but to be an agent, one of the requirements for that definition is that agents make choices, but God doesn't make choices. Okay, so then God's not an agent. So JRobin could pick something else to try to define God as, but he's not. He's just hanging on to the agency thing and then just insisting Jack must be out of his mind or wrong or going down a rabbit trail, as Darth always likes to say it. So far, Jack has put out some pretty good. He's asked some good questions. He's asked some good clarifying questions, and he's asked for what he's been given from JRobin. He's been able to lay out an entailment of why God doesn't exist. He's already done this. In fact, I think at 36, he's done it twice essentially. Where he's like, no, it doesn't have thoughts like a mind. It doesn't have agency. Therefore, there is no God. I'm paraphrasing that horribly. That's simplifying it in a really bad way. But all you have to do in this video is go back a couple and you'll see him lay it out. One time, I think he attempts to lay out the whole thing and JRobin starts flipping out. But JRobin continues to insist from here on out that Jack has not answered his question. He has not provided some kind of argument that entails the non-existence of God. And Jack is using things that JRobin has given him in the course of this conversation to do that. And JRobin refuses to acknowledge that it's happened.
I want to know from you, God is defined as a mind that is ultimate. How does it follow that there is no God, Jack?
Yeah. So, agency can either be discursive or non-discursive, right? There's no non-discursive sense of agency, right?
No, when I say God makes choices, we're talking about God being pure act.
You saying
So those aren't choices. Ding dong, those are not choices. When this is what equivocation looks like. When I say God chooses to do things, I'm talking about pure actions. Okay, so absence of choice. So why call them choices? When I talk about my motorcycle, I'm talking about my BMX bike, right? That's what I ride.
there's a
God is one
non-discursive
eternal. God is
sense
one
of
eternal.
agency,
God is
right?
one eternal. God is one eternal act.
Yeah. So
Okay.
you're saying
What
there's
is
a
the contradiction? What is the
non-discursive
contradiction?
sense?
What is the contradiction? What is the contradiction in that, Jack?
The contradiction is that there's no such thing as non-discursive agency. Right?
Okay. What is the
Because
contradiction? What I
agency
just
is
said.
discursive. Yeah,
What I just
agency is discursive.
what is the contradiction of what I just told you, Jack?
Yeah,
He just said there's no such thing as non-discursive agency. That's the contradiction. Agency, by definition, has to be discursive. There's a contradiction if you try to say otherwise.
you keep interrupting me as I'm saying it. Agency is discursive, right? God is not discursively agential. Therefore, God is not an agent. That's the contradiction.
Yep.
I explained to you what I meant by choices already.
So you explain to me what non-discursive agency is?
No, I explained to you how we describe God's actions as choices.
Well, I was asking you what
But they're not
non-discursive
choices.
agency
But they're not choices.
is.
But they're not choices. They're not choices. With
How is JRobin at this point? Like even I'm following this, and I don't do all that great with like newer jargon sometimes or fresher jargon. Like I don't understand. Like what you're describing is no longer agency, JRobin. That's what Jack is basically telling you. Because you're trying to say that God makes choices, but they're not choices the way that we think. Great. Okay, so they're not discursive. Like he doesn't have to think about those choices. That's essentially what God does. He chooses to do things, but didn't have to. He just acts. Right. But it's not like just acts like we would put it. Like we would say, oh, somebody just acts. That means they did it without even thinking first. It doesn't matter for God, right? All thought is God. All acts are God. God is pure act. God is pure thought. God is truth. God is love. So when it acts, it just happens, and it looks like a choice was made for us in our weird spatio-temporal snow globe that he built for us. But yeah, this is some weird special pleading going on.
To God's eternal nature. It's choices. We call them choices when we're speaking.
I don't know. It sounds like he's in the kitchen. He's either washing his hands or maybe he's like, preparing food or something. I'm not sure.
Of how we perceive God's actions through time. I've now told you this throughout the entire. I've said this now throughout the entire conversation. I said this now throughout the entire conversation. We're not talking about non-discursive agency. I'm just saying that we're not talking about God's.
So when God makes choices and they're non-discursive.
Wow. So now you're doing the dishonest attitude again by saying when God makes choices. When I explained to you that when we're saying God,
he's following your train of thought. You are saying that it makes choices, but then you're saying that it just acts. So you want it to be an agent makes choices. If you don't want God, if you're trying to say that God isn't something that makes choices, then stop calling him an agent.
God making choices, we're talking about God's actions as they're perceived through time. Okay? So I want to understand from you, with the understanding of the definitions I've laid out to you, where God is a purely simple being, okay, pure act itself.
Okay, I'm just going to lay this out that God is a purely simple being. That doesn't really mean anything. And divine simplicity is not simple. That's one of the tricks to it. It's actually kind of hard to wrap your head around as a theological or philosophical concept. I have lots of issues with it. But yeah, if you want to read up on that, go right ahead. It'll make your eyes cross. The fact I love it when these guys are like, I'm just saying that God is purely simple. in a theological sense. That right? It doesn't mean like most of these guys would say something like, "Well, God is." When we talk about the properties of God in terms of divine simplicity, we're not talking about things that God has or things that belong to God or some component of God. We're talking about like facets of a diamond. It's one thing. When you look at it from a different angle, you see the different facets of it. It's pure act. It's choice making, whatever. It's bonkers. And JRobin is getting in over his head, I think, in this conversation by trying to appeal to that concept when it does seem like it's something that he's relatively freshly acquainted with.
How does it follow that there is no God? How does that follow?
Yeah, so God is an agent. An agent makes choices. God doesn't make choices, as you just said. Therefore, God is not an agent, right? Agency is discursive, right? God is non-discursive. Therefore, God is not.
Did I not explain? Did I not explain to you that God?
So he just gave him two arguments right there, showing him that God is not if God's not an agent, then God can't create, and therefore, God didn't. There's no creation, right? That would follow if there was a God, right? But there is creation. There is a world around us. Sounds like there's no God, or at least not the one that you're defining, JRobin.
Does not make choices in the way that we're talking about them.
Yeah, I just said God doesn't make choices.
Good. And so then when I say God's an agent, that's obvious. I don't mean it in that sense.
Okay, so what sense do you mean it?
I've explained it already.
Oh yeah?
Now Jack is starting to get a little frustrated himself. He hasn't. JRobin has not done a good job of doing this. JRobin has tried to explain agency in God's case is that God makes choices, but they're choices only from our perspective, which means they're not choices, right? We perceive them as choices, but God purely acts, right? So this discursive element that Jack's talking about that is necessary for agency is not something, JRobin is admitting this implicitly, is not something that's happening with his God. Therefore, not an agent.
So I asked you for the common property. I asked you for the common property.
So
right,
I explained it. I explained it, Jack. I explained it a dozen times. I've explained it dozens of times now, and so you understand what I mean. You're not gonna try to bamboozle people into falling for this thing you're trying to do. Okay, the shtick. I want to hear
falling for this thing Jack's trying to do. What is it he's trying to do, JRobin? If you think there's a trick happening here, could JRobin even describe what he thinks Jack is doing at this point? Because other than winning this discussion, even though I don't think you can win at discussions, but if this were a debate and they were attempting to do this, or having a debate about the properties of God, JRobin is not doing well.
Hear the answer to my question. How does it follow that there is no God?
He just gave two answers while he had the sync running. JRobin is just refusing to listen at this point.
Jack, after understanding what we mean by choices and agency and ultimacy and mind, after understanding all of that, which you should, after all this time, how does it follow that there is no God, Jack?
I don't understand that little bit right there. Well, you should understand those after all this time. This time in this conversation, or all the time that Jack has been involved in conversations with y'all. So, because just because he'd been acquainted with it from other people wouldn't mean he necessarily understands what you mean by ultimate.
Unmute your mic, Jack. Explain it to us.
He has.
Jack, are we going to get an answer from how it is the case that there's no God, Jack? Are we going to get an answer to this question? Okay, so for the benefit of everyone in the room, I've explained to Jack, I've explained to everyone what I mean when I say choices. In recent weeks and months, the mic wasn't. I've held more. Reading. Yeah, Jack. All right, that's okay. I've explained that in the recent.
Hurry up and unmute your mic, Jack, so I can continue yelling at you. Where are you, Jack? And then Jack pipes up, "Oh, sorry, yeah, whatever, Jack. Let me talk." A behavior like this, JRobin, will not get you a wife or a husband.
recent past, I've started to hold more and more and lean more towards the notion of divine simplicity, where God is pure act, God is simple, not composite. This is a position I've started to lean more towards that I didn't necessarily, I wasn't holding to, I wasn't committed to that position in the past, but I've become more committed to that in the recent past. And so the explanation of this position is simple. We think of God as that which is ultimate, eternal, non-composite, okay, and pure act itself. Okay, God is not through time making choices, and then we're perceiving those actions as choices. When we say that God is making choices, when we look in the
I think this is the third time that JRobin has given a long explanation of what he means here, and it's still not really it's not getting him out of anything that Jack's brought up.
Bible, okay, when we look in life and we say God is making this choice, we're speaking in the sense that God is we're perceiving God's actions through time. Okay, and then we may attribute those things to be choices, but that wouldn't be an exhaustive explanation of who God is actually. Okay, we're just speaking in the sense that we're comparing it to how we may conceive of choices as actions, but we're just
JRobin's missing the fact that in his analogy so far, he's completely argued away any common property that this could have analogically with what he's talking about, right? The analogy is that God's a mind or God's an agent, right? Well, I think the analogy would be more like God is a mind, right? But part of being a mind, he wanted to, work in some of these other things. But the biggest thing for JRobin is it has to be an agent. God has to have agency in order to create. But now when he's talking about like things, aspects of creation, like deciding what to create or something, like things that we would tend to think of. No, that's just perceptual baggage that humans have. That's a limitation of human thinking. Okay, fine, great. But then how exactly are you imagining this God is acting then? Because he has introduced like, well, God is just pure act. All right. So it doesn't make decisions, it doesn't think about things. It doesn't have propositional content in its head, right? Like that was what Jack asked him before. So I still don't see how JRobin is like every time he goes back and he gets back into this, he just ends up stepping on the exact same rakes he's been stepping on for the entire conversation.
saying that God is acting through time, or God is acting and we perceive those actions through time. Okay, in the same way that we may act and do certain things, except we exist within time. And so Jack understands all of this. I'm sure Jack is very familiar with this. I've explained to him what God means. I've explained to him what mental means. I've explained to him what ultimacy means. He already knows it now that I need to explain it to him anyways. But he understands it now, and everyone in the room should understand it. And so the question
I don't understand where you're going with this. I understand that you're doing an enormous amount of special pleading, but I wouldn't admit to understanding what the hell you're talking about. You want to say something's an agent without it having agency, and you want to say it makes choices, and they're not choices. I'm surprised you're not just insisting on the fact that it can act and it's not an action.
question of the hour, the question of the century, really.
Because after all, an action happens within time, and God's atemporal, so it follows that God can't act.
Is how does it follow that there is no God? And as of yet, we haven't gotten an answer to this question. The question is still outstanding, and we're going to see if Jack wants to answer this question now. So, Jack, go ahead and answer the question. How does it follow that there is no God?
Yeah, I gave you the inference multiple times, right?
I explained to you how you're mischaracterizing God's agency numerous times.
Yeah.
Jack is utilizing the agent. He's utilizing the concept of agency that we have, right? And an agency can, do things. Jack has attempted to say, okay, this is the definition of an agent, and then all JRobin is saying, well, no, you're mischaracterizing God's agency. Based on what JRobin is describing, God doesn't have agency. Because agency is defined as something, right? Like a discursive act, right? The agency requires, some kind of discursive something happening. God's not doing that according to JRobin. So whatever's happening here is, well, it's actually, that's all JRobin really is saying is God is. It's a happening.
So you keep saying that you've explained it, right? Now
Did I not explain to you, Jack, how you're mischaracterizing God's agency? And
well,
that
you
we
said
just
something.
speak of God's agency. We speak of God's agency merely as we're perceiving God's actions through time. Did you not understand that?
No, I didn't understand it.
Okay, so when we say that God is acting, we're perceiving God's actions. We're saying that, for example, God flooded the earth. There is a temporal aspect to that event, okay? Because it's an event, and there are moment-to-moment successions of events that are occurring there, okay? But that's not how God is actually acting, okay? God is pure acted eternally.
He's not actually acting that way. He's pure act eternally. Could you make less sense?
And that these things are playing out through time, with time just being the succession of events as a medium of these actions that we're perceiving. That's all I mean when I say that.
Time is the medium of those actions, which would make them temporal, dingus. How does that make them in some, like, look, God deciding to do something or what, this makes no sense. No sense at all. First of all, there's automatically kind of a basic contradiction that a lot of people struggle with the idea of something being extant outside of time. Right? Because but theologians and have gotten around this by trying to say that God's immutable. Time is basically change, and God doesn't change, and therefore he's independent of time. Okay, but whatever he's doing to us is happening temporally. Whatever's happening to the earth is happening. He's not flooding something transcendent of our world. He's flooding the world in the story of Noah. So it's happening temporally, and he chose to do it, right? This does not make sense. The Bible itself lays out God's reasons for doing it. If JRobin wants to argue that that's just a lack of human imagination in describing God's will and his stuff, great. Then explain to me why you ding-dongs theologically insist that God is doing things because he desires to maximize his glory. You've stated that he has a desire, which means he's making choices based on that desire. And now JRobin's dodging the fact that this thing makes choices. The whole religion of Christianity is built on this one thing. Now, if JRobin wants to say that's not the God that he's talking about, then he's contradicting his other stance, because according to his worldview, the only worldview that can exist is the Christian one. So if he wants to say he's talking about just some Spinoza's God or theoretical God or some other God other than Jesus, he's lying, because those gods do not exist for JRobin. They can't, by definition. Only Jesus. Only the God of the Bible, as he understands it, can exist. That is the only possible worldview. And that God maximizes its glory. And what he's talking about here is not that God.
That. Okay? So I want to understand from you, now that we understand agency.
Well, I didn't
Okay, there's no
understand
now that there's no confusion about
I didn't
this.
actually understand that.
Now that there's no confusion.
Well, I
about
am
this.
confused about it.
I know you're confused, Jack, but try not to be. Try not to be. Okay?
Well,
try very
you
hard.
could
Don't hurt yourself. Don't hurt yourself. Don't hurt yourself.
You could just
Don't hurt
clear up
yourself.
my confusion by answering a couple of questions, right? Which I've asked.
I just explained it to you.
Times. Well, I didn't understand your explanation, but if you'd like, you can maybe offer a few points in clarification, right? So let me just pose a couple of simple questions so you can straighten it out for me, right? So you want to say that God does act, correct? Is that correct?
I'm sorry?
You want to say that God does act, correct?
There are actions of God that are God is an eternal act. Yes.
Oh my God, this is just torture. Notice how he's like, yeah, okay. Oh, but he said yes. Is that yes? He acts.
Like God is an act.
God,
when we
perceive of God and his actions, we're perceiving God's eternal character, God's eternal nature.
So he's acting.
Those things are expressed through time.
So those are actions.
Okay, but my question was: is God an act, or as distinct from God acting?
Well, God, we say that God is everything that is encapsulated within himself. So God is, like in Exodus 3, God is I am who I am. God is himself, entirely non-contingent, and he is perfect in that regard. God is perfect. He is all that he can be. God is not contingent upon anything else, and God is not lacking in.
See, this is always the thing. Instead of kind of like JRobin, and if for anybody who hasn't picked up on this, many of you have. There are plenty of people out there who are much smarter than me about this kind of stuff. When they get into this thing, look, I'm going to go right back to what I said. I'm going to describe this God to you again, and they start getting into the way theology describes a God, right? Or some kind of, it's usually not. They're not laying out some kind of philosophical syllogism. They're just going to get into, no, this is God as we define, ultimate foundation for all this kind of stuff, an eternal space. Right? They'll lay that part out. They can't really do anything to falsify that or prove that. They'll make claims in addition to those kind of basic definitions and say it's an agent, it chooses to do things. Once they start doing that, and somebody like Jack comes along and is like, whoa, what do you mean? What do you mean it chooses to do things? What do you mean it has agency? What do you mean it's a disembodied mind? They immediately start sputtering and trying to say, well, yeah, by mind we mean, well, of course, it's like a mind. It's like these things. Well, like a mind, it has these limitations, and it entails that these things must be a component of that in order for us to really consider it a mind. Oh yeah, not that. No, it's not that. Like, well, isn't that special pleading? It would be if it weren't a creator mind. Bonkers.
And that are deficient in anything at all.
Okay, but that's so,
so when we say God is acting, we're saying God is just perfect, absolutely perfect.
So you said that is that supposed to be some kind of synonym to say that God?
I don't know. I don't understand where you're confused here. Okay.
Well,
I'm still waiting to hear the answer to my question that you've now successfully.
That is what?
That you now successfully evaded over a dozen times.
Yeah. Well,
no, he hasn't. He's answered it many times. I don't think he's answered it a dozen times. I don't know that you've asked. You probably have asked it a dozen times. You just continue to ask it. You don't listen to the answers. You just ask a question and then insist you didn't get what you wanted.
I'll explain to you why I'm confused, right? Because what I asked you was, is it the case that God is an act as distinct from God being an actor, right? And then you told me that what you said a lot of things, but one thing you said was that when we say God acts, we're saying that he's perfect. And I asked you if that's some kind of definitional claim, right? Some kind of synonym. And then you didn't answer that question either, right? So we can go back to my original question, which is I'm still trying to understand whether your claim is that God is an actor or whether he is an action itself.
There's no contingency or potential.
I didn't say anything about contingency.
Potentiality in God himself. Everything that we see as an expression of God is just purely that. It's an expression that we may perceive of who God is with respect to his eternal nature. Okay, Jack, I understand you're on the street, but if you could go to somewhere quiet, that would be appreciated. Okay.
Oh no, I'm on route right now, so
okay.
I can't.
So when we're talking about God, when we're talking about God's nature in essence, okay, we're talking about God's eternal, simple form or nature, meaning that God is not divisible or not distinguished, or I think a better word would be God is not divided into these parts where we're conceiving of God as partially one thing, partially another thing. God is not and you have any potentiality within him. God purely is the being who is perfect, and all things derive and depend upon God.
Yeah, okay. So is that a yes to the question that God is not an actor, or is that a no?
No, God is there's no potency within God.
So is that a yes or a no to my?
There's no potency within God. Yeah, because it sounds like what JRobin wants to say is that God is potency itself, right? It just is. It just does.
My question.
I just explained to you.
What was the answer? Is it yes or no? I asked you.
Okay. Are you still confused?
Yeah, I'm still confused. I asked you if God is an actor.
So I'm going to define God again. Okay. God is defined as a mind that is ultimate. Okay, meaning that God is an agent, and I've defined agency already. God is relational. God is revelatory.
Revelational, revelatory, those are theological terms for this being. I love this. He just retreats right back into, let me hand you this grab bag of theological terms and definitions for the God that I think is real. And so that I can ignore the trouble I've gotten myself into by trying to hijack some philosophy to make these things seem more valid.
God is aware, fully self-conscious of himself, and ultimately denoting that God is foundational to all of reality and the basis and form, or the basis and foundation of all that is the case.
Okay, good. So God is an agent, and therefore he is. I take it agent is synonym for actor, right?
I've defined agency already. So
No, you just said God is an agent. You just said God is an agent, right?
And then I said, Jack. Then I said, I defined what agency was, and I defined what we meant when I said choices. Did I not?
Yeah, you obliterated them. The special pleading that you did about choices and agency were so catastrophic. You blew them up, and now he's going back to them to retreat. Like, yeah, sure, agency.
Did I not say that immediately after, or were you not listening like you don't do all the times? I know you don't listen. I know you don't enjoy honest discussion.
See,
but if you were listening, you would have understood.
See, I know you don't listen, and I know you're not honest. You weren't listening. Like, just assuming all this stuff into the opponent. Just like, yeah, you were never honest to begin with. I know you don't care about the truth. I know you're not an honest interlocutor. You're just trying to trick me. I really think maybe JRobin is so hot to trot to talk to atheists because he pictures himself like locked in an arena with Satan, and he's got a whip and a chair. He's the Satan tamer or something, like, he's a fiend for action, but what he really wants to do is, like, abusively exorcise someone, get that demon out of him by any means necessary.
What I said, you would have heard what I said.
Sorry, you're going a little fast for me, so let's just slow it down.
I understand. I know that. It's
yeah,
okay.
I'm kind of slow.
Jack.
So.
Oh, don't hurt yourself. So it's starting.
Jack, what did you hear the definition I gave to you?
It all went by too fast, so let's just go through it step
Did you hear the
step.
definition? Did you hear the definition I gave to you?
I mean, I heard the words, but I didn't understand them.
Okay, I'm gonna say it again.
No, don't say it again.
Let's
just clarify. Clarify.
Jack.
One of the things that consistently entertains me about JRobin is when someone like Jack kind of comes in and sort of plays up to the whole thing. Yeah, you know what? I'm a little slow, or you know what? Maybe I don't know this stuff as well as I'd like to, or something like that. Kind of give it like that is the beginning of slow rolling someone, and how quickly JRobin grabs onto that and uses that as permission to then treat that person like what he believes is that they've admitted to being a stupid person. Like, no, ding dong, they're slow rolling you. Like, this kid has, oh Lord, I don't. Does JRobin have any siblings? Because what he needed was to have siblings around him, so that while he was losing his mind a little bit, one of his siblings could just walk up to him and slap him hard across the face, and then take him outside to go play like a real game or something, just to get him out of his head, get him out of this, like, these twisted games that he's playing with himself. Because at this point, that's kind of what he's doing. Like, he could have this conversation by himself.
Jack, I'm going to define God again. I'm going to go through it slowly. I'm going to break out the crayons again. And I want you to follow the laser pointer, and I want you to follow what I'm saying here. Okay? This is not complicated, controversial, or convoluted. Okay? God is defined as an ultimate mind. Okay? Mind denoting that God is entirely self-conscious, self-aware. God is.
Wait. Let's go through each property.
Jack. I'm not going to take much.
See, JRobin doesn't want to do that. He doesn't want to be careful with these definitions. He'll just start laying things out because he's heard this stuff from theologians and from preceptors and apologists and ministers, and he's going to layer this stuff on like he's really stacking up. He's making a great argument because he's stacking up all this stuff in favor of his argument. And Jack's like, wait a minute, let's maybe take a look at those things one at a time. JRobin, his response, nope. No, we're not going to do that. What you need to see is, like, when we stack all this shit together, if you can make a formidable wall out of shit, right? But the individual pieces are still shit, right? But in this case, though, this is more like an illusion. Okay, what you've got is something that's not real, and then you're giving me more definitions for things that either aren't real or don't work, and you're trying to accumulate them so that they accrete into something like a rhetorical wall and say, aha, defeat this stuff as a brick. And when somebody's like, well, I don't know what that is anymore. That's what that is a mess, right? That's the equivalent of the Three Stooges all trying to go through the same door at the same time. Let's try and take these things apart and go one at a time. No. I don't know. That's dishonest. That's cherry picking. That's you going down this tangential rabbit hole. You dishonest crayon fondling rube. JRobin, you are a prince of morons.
Much more of this, honestly. You're completely and honestly trying to be evasive. You're being dishonest. You understand what I'm telling you. You're pretending like you don't understand because this is your tactic. This is your shtick. Okay, and I'm very well acquainted with it. Okay, I've humored it for a long time.
You've humored it for a long time. Okay, I thought he said humid. So what? This is unnecessary. You know his tactics, but you invited him to have a conversation with you. This is just performative nonsense that JRobin's doing. This is virtue signaling for other Christians. I know what you are, and I think by now my fellow believers know what you are, and I've laid this stuff out. You have been made to understand all the points that I'm making about the Lord abiding God. It is your God, Jack, and you need to repent. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, if you just repent and presuppose that my God is true, then none of my arguments will be a problem for you. Just drink the Kool-Aid, shove this knitting needle straight up your nose, give a twist and a twirl and pull out, and then maybe bottle the piece of brain that you removed. Then everything will work. This is all going to line up. It's all going to make sense. Nonsense. This is nonsense, JRobin. I think at this point, this is just JRobin really demonstrating his vanity. And it's exhausting because he's not that smart and he's not that interesting. He's just fucking annoying, which is why I keep coming back to him.
And I'm trying to get to a resolution to this issue, which you still haven't answered. Okay, you played around.
He's answered your question multiple times, you illiterate boob, and you refused to acknowledge what he was saying to you. You would often tell him that wasn't an answer after he finished giving it to you. He was giving you an inference. He gave you at least two separate inferences that lined up. You then went back and tried to redefine terms, and then act like he's not giving you an answer to your question. He did. He turned around and changed the rules. This is just shitty behavior.
I'm trying to play around the definitions of what I'm telling you, even though the definitions have been clear. You've accused me of equivocating when I haven't equivocated. You've accused. You've just been all around a dishonest interlocutor. Now I'm gonna tell you again what God means. I don't want you to.
I love that. I would like to hear from Jared. How is it what he did was not equivocation when he's talking about, it's a mind, but it's a creator mind, not a creature mind, therefore it's not the same thing. That is equivocation. You want to say that it's this thing, and then when somebody's like, okay, so it has these things, maybe not. It's more like this kind of thing over here. Well, what are you doing? That doesn't sound like what you mean as a mind. That he was equivocating.
Interrupt. If you interrupt again, we're done. If you act evasive again.
How often has Jack hasn't really interrupted that often during this entire conversation. I think JRobin has interrupted Jack more times. In fact, probably by a factor of 10, which is amazing because Jack hasn't really had that much of an opportunity to speak. And now he's going to say, if you act evasive, what's acting evasive? Answering your question in a way that you find too difficult to respond to? Because Jack's done that a handful of times, and you refuse to acknowledge that he's done it. So he needs to quit being evasive. Okay, let's give you that and claim that that's true, JRobin. You need to quit being delusional and full of yourself and stop lacking so much self-control. Grow the fuck up.
We're done. Okay? I told you I was going to keep you on a very short leash.
You're not done. People are done. Cakes are done. People are through. Get that right too, JRobin.
I've humored you. I've been patient with you for just about long enough. Okay? We're defining God as that which is ultimate and a mind. If we are defining of God that way, if we're conceptualizing of God that way, there are certain properties, if you want to call it that, of God that need to be understood. When we say that God is a mind, okay, we're thinking of God as that which is has some sort of a consciousness, meaning that God is aware of all that is, and God is entirely self-conscious of himself in eternity past. God is also relational. He reveals things to people. Okay,
Ugh.
God is that's essentially what it means to be for God to be in mind. And then I also added that God is an agent, meaning that when we understand agency, we're just saying that God we perceive God's choices in throughout time.
When we understand agency in your definition of what agency is, right? Agency is supposed to be about making choices and taking actions, right? And oh my God.
Okay. When we say now that God is ultimate, we're defining of God as follows. We're talking about God being that which is non-dependent, non-contingent, unconditionally so, and that all things derive necessarily and depend upon. Okay?
All good things. Not all things. All good things. Where do the bad things come from then, JRobin?
So how does it follow that there is no God, Jack, after understanding this definition?
Yeah. So you said God is pure act, right? And I take it that an action is something that's performed by an actor, but you also said God is an agent, right? So God can't simultaneously be an act and an agent. So it follows that God does not exist.
No,
There it is again.
agency or act just means that God is
See, so he gave him an answer again, and he gave it in a pretty solid inference, and then JRobin is going to go right back to quibbling over the definitions he's supposed to settle. He was asking these questions of Jack, and he's trying to give these definitions. And every time Jack is like, "Okay, here it is," then JRobin goes right back. No, you're not understanding what I mean by within the prepositions, because you're equivocating, JRobin. That's why you're not getting anywhere.
when we perceive things in time, when we perceive God's actions, okay, that God is eternal, and that God is not passing through time, and that God is not there's no potency when it comes to God. That God there's no potentiality that that is germane or that is native to God.
Yeah, that is always a weird. I mean, I kind of get where he's going with that. The idea that God could potentially do things or something like that. I think that's kind of a weird argument, because the idea is that I'm not exactly sure where they go with that, but I sort of it sort of follows if they're trying to stick with like an omnipotence kind of thing. God cans, therefore God does kind of thing, but God doesn't really. It's not about potentiality, so God. It's not about can. It simply will be. It's one of those torturous kind of ways of trying to get away from your own definition. But Fergus brings this up. He actually said God is an ultimate mind. Now he said God is ultimate and a mind. Right. This is something that these guys do a lot, because they get kind of sloppy with this. Like, is it an ultimate mind? Because if you want to say it's an ultimate mind, you could just say that it is. An ultimate mind could just be that it is and it's an emergent property from some kind of ultimate being. There could be an ultimate mind, which is the emergent property of the quantum slime mold that is the foundation of all reality. Right? I mean, I don't think I'm too out of bounds with that potential definition there. But then no, this thing is ultimate, and it is a mind, which means that there is a mind which is the ultimate thing. Everything that is grounded on this one mind. Now that changes things quite a bit.
God
So
is
wait,
purely
let me
perfect.
just.
God is pure. That is God is perfect, and whole and simple.
So God is not an action.
When we say
Is
God
that
is
right?
pure act, when we say God is pure act, or God is act, or God is eternal act, we're talking about God's perfection. Okay, that God is not
that a definitional
derivative,
claim?
that God is not derivative of anything, and that God is not subject to potential states of affair. Like there's potentiality within God. That God purely is
There is potentiality within God?
Metaphysical bedrock from which all things derive and depend upon.
Right, which means so it follows that anything that can be done, God has the potential to do that. God has the potential to do anything logically possible. So I don't understand why they're like, oh, God doesn't have potency in the sense that we think of like the potential. Like, well, I'm sorry, why not?
So we perceive of God's actions, if you want to call it that, as these events that pass through time, God's things that are attributed to God as that which is ultimate.
Again, this is bullshit. This idea that like, okay, well, they're choices from our perspective because we see them happen in our existence, which is temporal. Okay. So what you're saying is this God has always flooded the earth in Noah's day. It's tenseless in that sense. The fact that did God mean for it to happen in Noah's day, or was it just incidental? If it's an act brought about by an interaction of this mind, right? It's pure action. It's the foundation of the universe. It was going to happen. It didn't have the potential to happen. It wasn't chosen. It would happen. It was God's will. That sounds like slime mold thinking again.
Ultimate. We say God is pure act. That's what we're referring to.
So you're
Okay.
saying God performs actions?
You're saying that God is no. We can't say God performs actions.
God doesn't
Okay,
perform
we're just saying
actions.
that. Listen.
So he
I'm
doesn't
explaining
act.
to you why that could lead to confusion, because again we're
Why?
going to this idea of choices.
Okay, so God performing actions would lead to confusion, and yet special revelation, one aspect of it, the Bible, is filled with accounts of God performing actions. Is the Bible an act of confusing people? Is it designed to confuse people's ideas about God? Or is it in fact special revelation given to us? If JRobin's going to make the well, no, it was written by man and it was filtered through us, and so that we have this incomplete, whatever. The fuck ever. It's supposed to be special revelation. It's supposed to be what God wants us to know about him and his plan to glorify himself, right? His special needs and purposes. That's the one central thing about it. I don't understand how he's doing this. Like he should be talking himself out of Christianity at this point. I don't know how he hasn't become a pantheist yet. Let's see here. Note from the direction. 1, Jesus is God. 2, there was a point in his life when Jesus did not have a beard but could eventually grow one. 3, Jesus has potentiality for something. 4, God has no potentiality.
And temporality and moment to moment succession of events. So to say that God performs actions again is not what we're talking about, because we're saying that God is, there's no potency when it comes to God. There's a potentiality, then actuality, relationship between there. Okay, we're saying that God is purely perfect. God is not composed of anything, and that God is foundational to all of reality and ultimate.
Notice that all of those things are comparative statements, right? You can't define God just as itself, right? You can't point to it. You have to point to it in comparison with things that it's not, right? It's purely perfect. Relative to what? Well, anything, everything, whatever. And it's purely perfect. Meaning what? Why is there an adverb? Why is purely perfect? What did you put the purely in there for? Do you mean simply perfect, or do you mean simple? Because simply perfect and the definition of theological, like divine simplicity, are not necessarily the same thing. So if you want to say he's perfect, he's simple, okay, but that we're starting to get adjectives for something that we still don't have a concept for, right? And then to say, oh, it's ultimate, in reference to what? Everything, anything, the best, the biggest. All right, but you haven't defined what it is. All you've given are parameters for what it is compared to everything else. So it's better than anything else that we can think of. It's purer than anything else that we know. It's better than it's better than best. It's bigger than the biggest. All right, and now all of a sudden JRobin is throwing in the fact that it has a will but it doesn't choose, and it is an action but it doesn't act. And it has no potential, and it doesn't have potency or potentiality or something like that. Fucking ridiculous.
So what's the contradiction? What's the contradiction or the problem? If there's a contradiction or some other line of reason that you can give to me that will necessitate the falsity of God, Jack?
Right. So the contradiction is this. So God is essentially an agent. Agents perform actions. God doesn't perform actions. Therefore, God is not an agent. Therefore, God does not
I just explained to you what
Laid
the
it out
actions
again.
we're talking about here.
You just said he doesn't perform actions.
I just explained to you the sense in which we're talking about performance of action.
So there
Did I
is
not
a
explain that
sense
to
in
you,
which
Jack?
he performs actions.
All right, Jack. I'm gonna be here. I'm gonna be doing this for about 2 more minutes because it's really now showing your dishonesty and in its full glory. Okay.
It's showing your stupidity, JRobin. You want to say that he can act, but then you don't want to commit to what that means. And then you want to say he is an act or he's pure act, and you don't want to commit to what that entails. It just sounds like all you want to engage in is special pleading. And when somebody tries to take a concept that you give and follow that concept or that property or whatever it is you're doing and follow that entailment, and it leads to something that you don't like, you wave it away and try to change the definition.
I just explained it to you 30 seconds ago. If you were listening, you would have understood what I said, but you're not interested in doing that, which is obvious. Okay. So if you don't step up your game, if you don't stop with this dishonesty, then you're done. I've explained this to you numerous times, and I want to get a resolution and an answer to the question that's
Cakes are done. People are through. Come on, JRobin, follow me.
been asked to you. When we're talking about God, we're talking about him as that which is ultimate, that which is foundational to all of reality, and that nothing derives and depends upon. We say that God does actions. When you say God does actions, you're now implying or employing some sort of a temporal aspect to God as though he's extended within time.
You are showing your stupidity by strawmanning Hime. I don't know who Hime is, but I'm assuming you mean him. And by him, I'm assuming you mean JRobin. I'm not the one doing the strawmanning here. JRobin is attempting to, he invited Jack into this conversation, if you haven't watched it, and Jack has answered his question multiple times and provided an inference that JRobin should be able to follow if JRobin were a rational person. But JRobin has demonstrated in this conversation that he is not rational and that he's not really interested in rationality at all. He's just interested in special pleading and equivocation and lots of I don't know if he's done any specific question begging in this case, but I think the foundation for the God that he and you claim to believe in is based on a lot of question begging. So yeah, there you go. Elvis is king.
Time, okay, and that God is that is what we're talking about when it comes to God's actions. God is not extended in time.
Demonstrate it. Write it out in the chat. How am I strawmanning him?
With respect to his essential character or attributes. Okay, God is not extended in time. He does not perform actions when it comes to his essential nature, because God's not extended within time. God is the pure act itself. Okay, and that God, there's no potentiality within what we're talking about when it comes to God. There's no potency. Do you understand what I just said, Jack?
No.
Okay, thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for your time. That was a complete and utter fail on your part. You failed to.
God equals the square root of -1. Did you just dump Felix Rodriguez? I was waiting for him to type me up an essay here. I gave him some homework.
Defend your atheism. You failed to substantiate the claim that there is no God, and that's I think that was a good object lesson, a good case study.
And look who magically appears. Darth magically appears as soon as Jack is gone. Weird. He's watching that entire time.
For how we are exposing atheism one atheist at a time. I see Darth's here. So yeah, I think did you
see Darth's here? You probably brought him in. You're the only mod in the room. At least as far as I can tell.
Hear the entire thing, Darth? Were you here?
No, I just joined, but there are the regular sophist atheists, and they're a waste of time to talk to because they're purposely dishonest, when they dialogue and debate. So, I mean, you know who these people are. So it's a waste of time talking with them.
By the way, so there's news I heard by the grapevine that Jack is in here, by the way, and he and the other his groupies have been conspiring to try to get me onto modern day debate so that they could run the clock out and stalemate the conversation. Well, so now that I know that I'm not going on modern day debate.
Who would be making that kind of plan? Like that? Okay, I might be inclined to believe that somebody that is connected to Jack is trying to get Red Rocket here, because he's got such a hate boner for the atheists. He's got to keep thrusting it upon us. He's okay. Somebody's trying to get you onto MDD to have a debate. Okay, and they want you to get on there to have a debate with Angstreich. Okay, well, I don't know why that would be a problem. Those are usually limited to about an hour, hour and a half. That James usually keeps them that way. You just had an hour-long conversation with the man. You brought him in there, so why would that be an issue? Or is the issue that you would be moderated?
Wait, why would I do that?
Well, this is what happened when I went on Modern Day Debate. Many of the sophist atheists, they just monologue and run the clock out. They really don't dialogue and debate.
So Brandon is raising his hand again. Brandon, we're not talking to you.
Well, moron, this isn't a debate. It is a discussion, and he was discussing it with him. JRobin asked him multiple times to give him a rationalization for why there is no God, and Jack used the terms that JRobin had provided at the beginning of the conversation and laid it out for him multiple times. JRobin not only didn't get it, but he refused to acknowledge that he had even been told it.
Explained to you that I wasn't going to talk to you.
No, Brendan has a long history of trolling, right? Brendan will lie right to your face, knowing full well that you know that he knows that you're lying, and he'll just continue.
I don't even see the tail end of this is them. I'm pretty sure they're talking about Brenda. If not, if they're talking about an actual Brendan, okay, fine. I'm pretty sure though the resentment that these two they've known Brenda for a while, and I'm pretty sure they're just taking an opportunity to make sure they misgender her just a little bit.
You're lying. I've had literally dozens and dozens and dozens of interactions with this dude, and he's just a train wreck. So after a certain time, it's pointless talking with these people when it's clear that they're committed to being deceptive.
Precisely. So Brandon, you can put your. I see Jeff.
They're not. They don't really.
So Jeff, you can join if you want to.
That's not me, by the way.
Delivering cogent arguments for atheism. What they are.
Different Jeff. They're not talking because I think anytime I show up, if JRobin mentions me by name, he refers to me as, Jefferson Spatchcock, and you can hear a little bit of you can hear some snark in there.
Are doing is they will respond with a tote bag of various evasive verbal maneuvers.
Right, the asking of clarifying questions is a maneuver. Leophilius, what do they mean by run the clock out? These debates run 2 or 2.5 hours long on MDD. If you can't make and reasonably defend your case in that amount of time, you must not have one. Yeah, I think that's pretty reasonable. And I'm sure that JRobin will probably go on to tell people that in this discussion with him, with Jack Angstreich, the reason that they turn, as you can see up there, it says replays on. And watch here, as this is ending.
Really defending that there is no God, okay?
Because they can't.
No, how could you?
Right.
Common sense alone would dictate. How could you establish a universal like that? Okay? How could you?
Did you invite JS up, Darth, or S?
No, I didn't invite anybody up.
Okay, well, JS is not allowed back on stage because he had, again, a history of doing this evasion and deception.
Okay, well then,
so
get rid of him. Don't be embarrassed about dropping the hammer on these people who just engage in sophism. And no, we don't call people sophists because we simply disagree with them, but it's easy to see it, when they put it on display. Welcome to the room, Matt. What would you like to say?
Well, thank you guys very much for letting me come up. Appreciate the chance to hopefully be a rational atheist for you and not dodge your questions. I think it's hard to make a case for atheism because it's the absence of a position.
It's the absence of that. Well, that guy, I don't know what happened with that guy, but I'm sure that did not turn out well for him. Thank you for taking out those Russian bots are annoying. Let's see. I will post the link here because I'm gonna wrap this up. Actually got this done in a decent amount of time. I thought this might take over 3 hours, so I'll throw the link in for the little bit of time that I'm going to be on for as usual, and then Anybody wants to jump in? Has any questions, comments, concerns, rants? I was waiting for a breakdown from Felix about how I strawmanned JRobin while reviewing this. Not sure how that happened. Maybe Felix could demonstrate how, or if he thinks Jack Angstreich strawmanned JRobin. I think JRobin feels that way because JRobin wants to turn around and change the definitions around. Hello, Jay.
Hey, Jeff. I just woke up not too long ago and noticed you were alive. Yeah.
Yep.
More JRobin, more Darth, more bullshit, more butt fucking.
Yes. He just continues to be sort of an enraged hemorrhoid in Clubhouse, I guess. I shouldn't use the hemorrhoid thing. That's like Darth Dawkins' favorite. He likes to talk about people having hemorrhoidal attacks.
Yeah. I I found something interesting yesterday, and that was something from Praise I Am, the guy that still wants to, I think he still wants to kill me. I think I made him a little upset last night.
Oh, well, I mean, you made him upset a couple of years ago when he threatened to kill you. So
yeah. He do you want to see what it is? It's really kind of funny.
Is it a video that he did?
No, just a post. If you go to his community, if you go to his channel and then go to community, it's his latest. Should still be. I think it's still the latest community post that he has up there.
Let me take a look here. Let me open another. Get the page open here.
I was showing this to I showed this to Nicola last night. And I did a little bit of homework on it while watching a movie. It wasn't.
Oh, this goofy thing.
Yeah, the one about.
I looked into this a little bit. Even I and then I quit when I realized how dumb it was.
Oh yeah.
Let me see here. Share screen. All right, let's see. Praises channel. Okay, is it this thing?
Yeah, that's it.
Yep. Not only do Christians dominate the percentage of scientists and professors, but we also dominate the demographics of scientists and professors. It's a total washout. This is the largest. Sorry, I had to do the praise laugh. This is the largest worldwide survey and research conducted ever, led by Elaine Eklund and others. Whoever claims, it would help if I clicked read more. Whoever claims scientists and institutions of science are contrary to Christianity are the biggest imbeciles on the planet.
Yeah.
All right. So, and then I remember reading this, and they were talking about a variety of countries, because even here, wherever he pulled this meme up from, it's like Christianity. It's not what you think. Christianity dominates all science. They cite Elaine Eklund, Christopher Scheitel, and fellow Rice researchers, Kristen Matthews and Stephen Lewis, collected information from 9,422 respondents in 8 regions around the world: France, Hong Kong, India, Italy, Taiwan, Turkey, and the UK, and the US. They also traveled to these regions to conduct in-depth interviews with 609 scientists, blah, 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 blah. And then they have a statistical breakdown of people. Disbelief in God by academics. Disbelief in God.
Okay.
Not adherence to Christianity. Belief or disbelief in God.
Yeah, here's how it works. So there's a problem with the numbers, and okay, the numbers in the first block of yellow right there. Well, just if you click on let's click on the comment thread real quick. And you scroll down. Now, real quick.
Oh Lord. So okay, here's the thing then. Before we get into this, I'm just gonna tell the audience, this is usually what my brother does. He finds something like this and he wedges his way in like a tick. And then he makes a comment, and usually the comment ends up turning into this, like, this will probably shatter off into like what, 45 comments, you think?
No.
No?
Nope.
You don't. Oh, okay.
No, I don't think so, because
I'm not saying that as a criticism. I'm saying that as an observation, because it's usually what happens.
Yeah. No, he ended it with "Shut up, dumblet."
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, but so here's the thing. Scroll back up. All right. So this is real easy to find. When you go to his sources, see the source number 3 right there. See the date on it. It says 2007.
Yeah.
Okay. The text that's mostly in black right here with the 9,422 respondents, that's from a 2016 study. The numbers in yellow, like this first block that's yellow highlighted right here, those numbers right there
Or from her study, the 2007.
No, they're from the 2007 study. They don't match. They're not okay. So the problem with this is, all right, so go ahead and go down. I don't know what the second block is, but if you read what I write there in my comment.
Yeah, this meme seems to conflate two studies, one study from 2007, another one that was published in 2016. The text not highlighted in yellow mostly comes from the 2016 study. The yellow highlighted text, at least the first block, comes from the 2007 study. As for the second block of yellow highlighted text, I can't find those numbers in either of those two studies. Maybe they're referenced in one of the sources cited in either study. Here's where the fun begins. The percentages listed in the first block of yellow highlighted text are accurate, but I think it's trying to imply that by listing these certain percentages of non-believers, that one will come to the conclusion that the number of scientists that are believers is higher. For example, non-believers in the field of physics is listed as 40.8%, leaving the reader to possibly conclude that 59.2% of scientists in the field of physics are believers. So out of 100% of scientists in the field of physics, or to be even more charitable, simply 100% of respondents to the survey, 40.8% of non-believers, leaving the majority of 59.2% as believers. This is inaccurate to the study. To demonstrate, I will show the numbers based on what the study actually says based on just the respondents in the field of physics. Which one of the following statements comes closest to expressing? Yeah, this is what I wondered about too. I do not believe in God, 40.8%. I do not know if there is a God and there's no easy way to find out. And there is no way to find out, 29.4%. I believe in a higher power, but it isn't God, 8.1%. I believe in God sometimes, 2.8%. I have some doubts, but I believe in God, 12.8%. I have no doubt about God's existence, is 6.2%. If someone doesn't believe me, simply do a search for source 3 that Praise posted, and you will easily find the study and can view the numbers for yourself. Also, those numbers aren't based only on Christians. Exactly, because they're talking about Turkey and India. It's like,
no. That's the other problem. The 2007 study is only based in for American institutions.
Oh, that's even worse. Okay, all right.
The 2016 study, I think it's a 2012 to 2015 is when they conducted it, but the study was published in 2016. That one that's the big one. That one they did they sent out shit to 8 different countries, 22,000 people, 22,000 scientists, and then that's where you got that 9,422 respondents back. That's the number. That's the amount of respondents that they received based on who they sent shit out to.
Gotcha. Yeah.
But the respondents in the sample size for the 2007 study was only 3,000.
But we've got 70% that are atheist or agnostic.
2,000. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Because that 40.8 and plus 29.4. So we're right around 70% that are firmly in the category of agnostic / atheist.
Yeah.
Which is those are the two most irritating categories for them.
The 2016 study specifically states that out of so more than 50% of scientists from US, UK, and France identified as neither being spiritual nor religious. That's from the 2016 study.
Well, here we go. So he says, you copied this from Psychology Today, which is fake news. Elaine herself verified these numbers. You wrote, wrong, prove I copied it from there. And you wrote, did you not read where I wrote that the numbers listed in the first block of yellow highlighted text were correct? I'm thinking you did, and you simply didn't comprehend like you normally do. I would say normally don't. 40.8% is the correct number for scientists in the field of physics that responded with disbelief in God. But that doesn't mean that there is a majority of scientists in the field of physics that believe in God. It's also not based on scientists that are only Christians. You have to take into account the other categories. Shut up, dumblet. Okay, so yeah, all right. So he's now realized that he's trafficking in fake news, I think. I'm waiting to see if you can prove I copied something over from Psychology Today. That was your claim. If you had actually read those studies, you would have seen how defending that meme was a stupid thing to do. Not only does it misrepresent the data from the 07 study, but you would have also read that from the 2016 study, where it states that more than 50% of scientists from the US, UK, and France that responded to the survey identified as neither religious or spiritual. And I can quote you on that directly from the study.
Mhm.
Oh, it's just, yeah, it's Praise trying to,
Yeah.
Praise tries to flex with the meme.
Yeah,
biffs it.
I like the fact that he accuses me of basically citing something from fake news, but he's defending a meme that he didn't validate. He's just defending it because he likes what it says.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, yeah, it's kind of a, yeah. I thought you might get a little kick out of that. I was gonna do a little video on it, but then I was like, and I still might, but either way, it's not really that big of a deal. It was just like, really, dude, you really want to die on that? All right. You want to die on that town? Okay.
Michael Deaton just timed out. He timed out Felix for 300 seconds. Thanks for that. Yeah, I didn't appreciate that Felix was telling Nisa Threepwood to calm down and stop trolling. Like it's my job to tell my dumbass trolls to stop muting you, not your job, Felix. So be good. It's maybe stop calling them dumbass trolls too. That's disrespectful. I don't show up at your channel and call your friends dumbass trolls or viewers, followers, cultists.
I think I've seen Felix in a stream once, but it could have been a different Felix.
Yeah, Dan. So someone cherry picked something to make their claims seem more relevant. What are the odds? Yeah. In the age of alternative facts, and yeah.
Well, Praise loves his memes. He thinks memes are like, gold nuggets of wisdom. all the time with the memes, and then almost all of them have to do with atheism, which always killed me because he'd get Veckel in there. Veckel's like, I don't understand these atheists talking about Christianity. They don't even believe in Christianity. Why can't these atheists just talk about atheism and just stick to that? I'm like, well, why can't Praise just stop talking about atheists? He doesn't shut up about it, at least not in his memes or his community posts.
Daniel Cooper, Kool-Aid drinkers is a category. I forgot that I was referred to as the Spatchcock clan. So yeah, I guess I don't want to call people that are subscribed to my channel Klansmen. That's fucking terrible. But who was it that it was? PMars. PMars did that. PMars he did like a video about the Spatchcock clan. He was trying to. It was super cringe. Yeah, he was sort of insinuating that I had a cult of followers, and this was when I was at 300 subscribers or something like that. I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, even now, I'm not a big channel at all.
Yeah, but this is the same guy that basically accused Slim Jim of sexually abusing his children while alive.
Yeah, and he did it to a cop of all things, which is fucking dumb.
I was like, are you fucking stupid or what? I'm like, don't ever go to Michigan. Ever. That's not doxing because people. I'm not.
And it's also not a threat. It's actually just advice for anyone. Don't go to Michigan. Stay out of Michigan. Sir, what's going on?
Well, not much. Just getting freezing rain, so I came and sat down and then saw that you had a hangout.
Freezing rain in the Midwest? No.
So. How could it be?
Wait, Michael Deaton says Coxman. I think I might go with that. It seems a little bit, I don't know, maybe it's not inclusive. Coxman. Yeah, there are probably better pet names for us. Agreed, Maya.
Cox persons.
I'm going to have to change my username if I want to come up with something clever that kind of goes along with the brand. It's not going to work. Yeah, Daniel Cooper, Survival 101, stay out of Michigan. Uh-oh, it's been a long time. Hello, Tangelo.
Hey, guys.
It's been a while. How have you been?
Fine, thanks. And you guys?
I've been fighting with the flu. A lot of people have, though.
Oh, yeah, here in Brazil, it's the same.
Oh, no. The original coof.
And people are dying here.
I mean, the U.S. I think still is leading cases for COVID. So yeah, we still have a pretty consistent. I mean, deaths are down, but now the strain of the flu that's kind of hitting people is not is not a gentle one. It's like a pretty bad form of an avian flu. It's an influenza A strain, and it is. Yeah, I can attest to it. I've been fighting it for the last 4 weeks.
Wow. No, here in our state, we had over 20 deaths just with that flu.
Yeah, no, it's not surprising. Yeah.
Oh, did you ever review that, Jeff?
Yeah, no, yeah. I don't know if, I've been waiting on this. So Tom said One Way has threatened copyright claims against me and said that he reported / flagged the video with him and his wife on the grounds that it was, quote, mocking the disabled.
Yeah, we talked about who was that? What was his? I'm blanking on his name. He was on your channel last time, or was that was Friday?
Alistair.
Alistair.
Yeah.
He was because we were looking at it in the.
Mike, I'll just point to a comment that Michael Deaton came in and he's like, yeah, we all stand One Way's wife because she was yelling at him to take her to get her to the doctor's office, right? So it's like, I don't think like the claim One Way seems to be making is like, oh, well, you're making fun of my wife because she's disabled. I don't think anybody knew that she was disabled. They're pointing out the fact that she's yelling at One Way, who's just sitting on a computer, and she's like, you need to get your ass up and get things done. That was sort of the point of the video.
You smoke pot too.
And you smoke pot. Who were you to judge? Yeah.
It's like, well, I used to smoke pot. And then you hear in the background, bullshit, you fucking liar. You still smoke it.
All right. But on that, I think I'm gonna this has been going on. We're just under 3 hours, so I'm gonna take this off air. Thanks everybody for showing up and watching. Thanks for comments. Thanks for engaging in the live chat. Yeah, I'll catch you guys all later. But I am going to highlight this before I go. What's he say? Time Rabbit. Well, mocking One Way is mocking those who are illegally intellectually disabled. Thanks, Nicola. Thanks for turning that up just a little bit more. All right, folks. Subscribe, or don't. Take it easy, everyone. Bye.